Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call to order the March 19th, 2019 work session for the Methacton School District Board of Directors. Please rise for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
By way of announcements, the public is hereby advised of the audio and video recording of this meeting for the purposes of rebroadcasting. For attendance, we have all board members here this evening. And recognition of guests and scheduled speakers, I turn it over to Dr. Zerbe.
Good evening. Thank you, Ms. President. This evening we're here at Arrowhead Elementary School for the school board work session. And this evening, for March 19th, we have a number of presentations for the board to consider. We have the district telephone system replacement by Dr. Sosnovic, a comprehensive school counseling Act 33-9, Dr. Katona, the master plan, Mr. Fretz, and our contractor, Fidavia, Arrowhead Design Professionals, and the Arrowhead Forward discussion of the board. And then, of course, next week we have our regular staff recognition. We have Mr. Bricker coming forward for the update for the 2019-2020 budget. We have master plan bond parameters with PFM and the Arcola Intermediate School schedule changes proposed for 2019-2020. With that, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Dr. Sosnovic, and I believe he has some folks here from E+ Technologies who will be presenting the recommendation for a replacement telephone system.
All right, thank you so much. As Dr. Zerbe said, my name is Troy Sosnovic. I'm the Director of Technology here. Tonight I'm going to be presenting our recommendation for a replacement phone system at Methacton. So I handed out to you an overview, an executive summary of the entire plan for the replacement of this phone system. What's prompted this project is an announcement that was made by Toshiba that they were no longer going to be supporting their telephone systems moving forward and effectively shutting down their telecom system division as of May 2017. Our current system is a Toshiba Strata 670. It was installed in 1976, and once Toshiba announced that shutdown, just prior to that deadline, Mitel decided to acquire that business, and essentially they acquired it just for the customer base. They were not going to produce any additional system and or parts. They were just going to sell off the inventory that they had. Approximately 1 year later, in November 2018, Mitel announced a phase-out plan of all Toshiba lines, and so our current system is near end of life. And what is more important, that parts are extremely limited in terms of their availability, and they're only available through secondary markets. In fact, we've been told by our support vendor, Phone America, that if our voicemail server ends up going down, we would not be able to replace it at this current time. So for some time we've been taking steps to get us ready for the eventual replacement in terms of system evaluations, network setup and design. As you can imagine, much has changed in the world of phone systems since 1996. The big buzzword now is unified communications. Unified communications is really taken over the scene, and basically what that means is voice data is transported over IP-based networks. Unified communications, just to help define the term, is a term for a system that integrates basically all forms of communications and devices together under one platform. So think of things beyond just voice. You have voicemail, your online collaboration tools, video calling, instant messaging. All of these things that were unique products beforehand are all now wrapped up underneath one umbrella. Starting last summer, we began evaluating UC systems that would meet our need. We looked at things like scale, failure, features like E911, etc., and we narrowed it down to 3 potential vendors. We narrowed it down to a Cisco solution, a Mitel solution, and if you could follow me, a Mitel ShoreTel solution, because Mitel ended up buying ShoreTel as well. The system that we ultimately elected as our recommendation is a Cisco Unified Communications Business Edition platform. Listed on your sheet, and unfortunately, if you could squint your eyes hard enough, you might be able to see some of the bullet points of the highlights of the solutions that this system has to offer. First and foremost, Cisco UC is literally #1 in voice and IP telephony in the world. The other major feature with the Cisco UC platform is that it seamlessly integrates into our Cisco network, which runs all of our data here. It provides advanced voice and voicemail features, features such as messaging presence. It integrates with our current systems such as Exchange and Active Directory. One other important feature to list here is that it would bring us up to compliancy on the E911 regulations set forth by the state of Pennsylvania, which requires buildings to have what are known as ERLs, or emergency response locations, which when someone places a call to a 911 center, what is communicated to that 911 center should be the building and the floor that call is coming from. Through this solution, we're going to be able to drill down to even a classroom level. And what's even better with this system is if a 911 call is placed and someone hangs up that call, the 911 center now has the ability to call back directly to that phone in the classroom where they do not have that feature currently available to us. The other one to point out is that from a support standpoint, this is important that both of the vendors are from the same, both solutions are from the same vendor. It provides our ability to provide technical support end-to-end without getting multiple vendors involved. For example, if we moved with a Mitel solution, if we were having trouble with our voice, or the calls were not going through correctly, or they were not sounding as clear, we would have to open a support ticket with Mitel first. They would blame it on the network. We'd open a support ticket with Cisco. We'd troubleshoot it, and they'd probably go back and blame Mitel, and we'd have to play that cat and mouse game. Having it in one integrated system, again, provides us some advantages, not only through network protocols, but that single support individual will be able to support us from the handset all the way through the network to the next handset. From an end user device perspective, we've selected 3 models. The 3 models are listed there for you. They are a single wall mounted phone that'll go into classrooms, a 4-button desktop phone for support staff areas, and then a 10-button desktop phone for building receptionists and some other areas. The solutions provider we elected to use on this project is ePlus Technology out of Pottstown, Pennsylvania. I've handed out a packet containing some information on their company. They've been around since 1990, and they've done extensive work in the K-12 space, not only in phone systems but in networks and other core technology solutions in schools. In fact, they've been supporting us here at Methacton since 2012, when they initially worked on us with redesigning our network. And they currently support us in that same capacity. So I want to just take a moment. I'm going to introduce Heather, and she's going to just talk a second about ePlus and then what they do, if you could. Here,
Okay. Hi. My name is Heather Del Grosso. I'm an account executive with ePlus Technology. As Troy mentioned, we're located in Pottstown, Pennsylvania, but we're a national and then a global organization. We've actually been working with Methacton for close to 20 years prior to Troy's position here, but we're local. We have a large group of engineers. We've worked with Cisco, with IP telephony for years. We have a lot of local and national references. My engineer, Dan Hosel, he's a senior solutions architect, one of many of the CCIEs that we have on staff, and he was nice enough to join us tonight. So thank you.
So if you look on the back side of your sheet, what I provided is a list of schools in the southeast area of Pennsylvania that ePlus has designed and implemented similar solutions for. You'll probably recognize most of them. Some of our closer neighbors, as you can see, are Lower Merion, North Penn, Upper Perk, Boyertown. From a project cost perspective, we anticipate year one costs of $573,000, inclusive of hardware licensing support, professional services, and the wiring required. To note, licenses are perpetual, and the only reoccurring costs we can anticipate would be, any phones that might break, through the agreement. However, just know that our phones do come with a 5-year warranty on them, as well as any hardware and software support costs we would have to pick up in year 6. We'll be using existing wiring for all the desktop phones because we're actually going to utilize the cabling that's going to their desktop computers already, and then we're going to tether the phone off of that. However, we do need to run cabling for the wall-mounted phones in the classroom since it currently does not exist. What exists in the classrooms today are what's known as two-pair wire, which is a traditional phone, and we need a Cat6 Ethernet cables. The projected timeline is listed. We met with the property committee and presented this on the 11th. I stand before you today on the 19th with your approval on the 16th or 26th. We would then immediately do a project kickoff in early April, procure the system, do all the infrastructure set up. We would immediately have wiring installation come in. They're scheduled to be, if this moves forward, all after hours, so it would not impact our current day operations. And then we would have everything set up and ready for a system cutover by July 31st. That concludes my executive summary. I'll be glad to take questions.
Thank you, Dr. Sosnovic. Are there any questions for members of the board? I'll start on my left-hand side. Mr. Earnshaw.
Just a few questions. First of all, thanks, Troy, for providing all this information. As far as the cost for the project, is that year 6 cost an annual cost?
That year 6 cost is an annual cost moving forward.
And then how long does that run out at that rate, or are there escalation clauses built into that?
So that rate is an estimated cost, right? So we're looking at year 6. What I did to calculate that, I worked with Heather to determine what that that support and hardware, the hardware and support costs would look like in year 6, and that would run out basically indefinitely in terms of as long as we have that phone system. It is not required to run the phone system. If we elected to at any point, we could say we don't want to have hardware support or software support that guarantees us future upgrades to the software, and our phone system would work just fine, but if we got into a situation, we wouldn't have that support to help us through it.
Right, but in all likelihood, you probably would.
Correct.
So around the end of year 5, you'd negotiate a support contract for year 6 and beyond.
That's correct.
And is this wiring cost, is that a fixed number?
Yes, it's a fixed number.
That's a fixed number. So regardless of what happens, because I assume you're running wires through, new wiring through ceilings and walls and all that.
Yeah, we brought installers out. They gave us project estimates, and that is a fixed number.
Okay, and then this price covers all the buildings within the district for that wiring?
That is correct.
Okay. And then as far as the phone traffic, do we carry that phone traffic on our own district network?
Yeah, so currently the phones are segmented because we don't have an IP telephony system now. It's like it's known as a digital PBX, but it still has its own private network that it connects between buildings to. That's going to be eliminated, and we're going to fold it into our current networking infrastructure.
Okay, so is there any potential for them for cost reduction because the traffic you're carrying from building to building, I assume, doesn't leave the district's network, so you're not going over Verizon or any other
Yes,
external
but
carrier?
that's how it currently is now.
It currently is that way? Okay.
Correct.
All right, got it. All right, that was it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else to my left? Ms. Drummond?
Yeah, I'm just looking also at the year 6 numbers and the hardware and software support figure, but I'm looking at the zeros in the other categories of the system, phone, and licensing and the professional services. And is there any way to anticipate any costs related to those categories or not really?
Yeah, so honestly, from the way I see it, is there's going to be very minimal, if anything, in terms of phone replacements. I mean, these phones, again, like I said, have a 5-year warranty on them. They're not going to, I'm not looking for them to, die off year 6. We'll probably get, 7 to 10 years or more worth of life out of those telephones. From a system standpoint, the only thing we might anticipate, and I'd say maybe like year 7 to 9, is that, again, the system itself runs on servers, right? And those servers do age over time, and we might need to look at a replacement appliance for that, maybe around, like I said, like 7 or 9 or something. But the cost for replacement would be wrapped into an operating budget because it would be nominal, maybe like $5,000 for an appliance or something along those lines. From wiring, I don't anticipate any additional wiring. And then professional services, our staff will be fine with it.
Okay, thank you, and thank you for putting this together.
You're welcome.
Anyone else on my left? If not, to my right? Yeah. Ms. Cancro?
The only question I had was basically the wiring of the classroom to the wall. I just know that they're located on teachers' table, on their desks currently, or no?
No, they're not.
They're all on the walls?
That's correct,
Okay.
yes.
And just that's all I want to
Yeah,
know.
the standard is when you walk in on the door, well, they're either on the left or right-hand side. Most classrooms, depending on the entrance of the door, they're going to be right on the right-hand side, unless they have like a side light or something along those lines.
Mr. Navarrete?
Yeah, I guess a similar comment, right? We talked about phone placement in property. We talked about this, and I couldn't remember where I saw the complaints about phones being on the doors and the inconvenience that it was, right? And you said, obviously you had experience there. It was here. It was in some of the feedback that we got from the teachers about improvements. It was that, having phones by the doors is an inconvenience when I need to call a parent or when I need to have a private conversation maybe with another administrator. There's not workspaces there. That would be my only concern about the way that this is structured now. I don't know what feedback was sought from teachers in this, but it seems like something that we should consider. I know you talked about configuration, classroom configuration concerns.
I did, and I
Yeah.
actually, after our meeting, I polled the county. I went out to my counterparts, and the majority of districts also follow the same standard model. And some of the reasons, as I mentioned before, in terms of if a teacher wants to have a private conversation in the sense that they have a full classroom, they could step outside the classroom with, the door, with the handset. The other one was for, it reduces phone damage during the summer because we strip out all of the classrooms every summer. So that a lot of districts had complained about losing phones and/or significant phone damage to units as those type of cleanings took place and stuff like that. So I think we're following a fairly standard model through K-12.
I think also, Mr. Navarrete, I think at the property committee meeting, Dr. Sosnovic referred to the fact that, the classrooms change almost on an annual basis. Not every classroom, but, we have different teachers going in, and while it's true that, from a survey that we did here, there might be feedback that suggests it's an inconvenience to be able to, on an annual basis, get to the priority of each individual teacher for where the phone needs to go. It's an enormous amount of labor to get to that. So while it may seem appropriate, especially as an end user, from a system perspective, it would make it very difficult for us to manage long-term.
Understood. I appreciate that. And thank you for looking into it further. The one thing that I would suggest then is if there are teachers throughout the district then that do want to do have those conversations, like you talked about, this being a unified system, if there is a way for them to make those calls, that we at least publicize it then out to people, that if they want to sit at their desk and make a call, there's a way to do it through their computer.
Okay.
Any other questions from my right? If not, we have this on the agenda for your consideration under 9D for next week. Thank you, Dr. Sosnovic, and thank you, folks from ePlus Technology. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Next on the agenda, we have Dr. Katona. Dr. Katona is our Director of Curriculum Instruction and Assessment. She will be here this evening to talk about the Comprehensive School Counseling Act 339 plan. Dr. Katona?
Good evening. On tonight's agenda, the Chapter 339 plan is listed as an action item for approval this month. The plan has been attached to tonight's meeting agenda. I would like to take a few moments to share not only some components of that plan, but also take a wider look at the work our district has been focused on with college and career readiness. Mrs. Schmitz, who is here this evening, is our K-12 college career counselor, and she provided this presentation in detail to the Education Committee earlier this month. I'll take a few minutes to review it through summarizing many of the slides and then focusing in on a few notable areas in the last few slides. So this slide basically summarizes a description of the plan. Most notably, you'll see there are 3 domains of academic, career, and personal social focus in terms of student development. The plan is aligned with the career education and work standards, and it will be reviewed annually with updates being provided to the board. You can see that there are a dozen required components of the plan, several of which will be further explained in subsequent slides. So one of those components is the mission statement and role of the counselor. As our counselors develop the required mission for 339, they work to align it with our district's mission, and they also ensured that they incorporated those 3 domains of student development. So you'll see that the beginning of it reads that the mission of the Methacton School District Counseling Program is to maximize student potential in academic, career, and social emotional development. And it goes from there. When you look at the plan itself, you can see that there are program goals for each grade range. And our counselors will be monitoring these and checking on our progress toward accomplishing each of those program goals. The plan also contains action items for these 4 stakeholders: parents, educators, business community, and post-secondary. Each of these action plans identifies ways in which the counselors will engage these stakeholders in the goals set for the students. And so this really brings together the goals that have been set as well as the action plans, making sure that we are reaching out to the appropriate stakeholders throughout our community. This past October, Mrs. Schmitz first brought together our advisory council. This was to provide an overview of the 339 plan, as well as our extended career work in Methacton. The council will reconvene this April, and they will meet annually thereafter. The academic career plan and portfolio information here, it lays out how student information will be captured electronically. So as our counselors are ensuring that our students are working toward accomplishing the goals that have been set, as we are working toward collecting the evidence that needs to be collected to satisfy the Future Ready PA Index, et cetera, this slide shows some of the ways that will be captured electronically. Notably, grade 6 is now using Naviance, and its use continues throughout grade 12, which helps our students align their strengths and interests to their post-secondary goals. Part of the counselor's work within the plan is to help students better understand opportunities for them available through the Career and Technical Center. And these are some of the efforts being made, both from our students going out for visits, as well as representatives from the Career and Technical Center coming to us. This slide captures some general information about the counseling program, its, again, overall purpose, and the career development components. And here I mentioned ago, for example, the Future Ready PA Index. On this slide, you can see the connections between the 339 plan and some district and state initiatives. So in our district, we know that we have the strategic plan, and under one of the items in the strategic plan, we talked about college and career planning, supporting the social, emotional, and developmental needs of our students. We know that the Future Ready Index emphasizes the importance of career awareness, exploration. We know that our students need to be showing evidence of reflection on different careers and different ways of thinking about where they might wish to head as they move on throughout their K-12 experience and beyond. Okay, so I'd like to spend a minute or so here. This slide outlines much of the work our career counselor, Mrs. Schmitz, has been doing over the past year and a half and continues to do so. 2 years ago, we became part of a group of other districts in the county who started to work with MCIU to identify how we were going to pull together a 339 plan to look at some of our strengths and weaknesses were as far as career is concerned. And since taking on this position, these are some of the things that she has been actively involved with on a regular basis. So just to highlight a couple of these items, the first one, in terms of collaborating with administration and professional staff to further develop opportunities, she's been building greater awareness by talking and meeting with principals, by going to some teacher meetings at times, by presenting at faculty meetings, by coming to being at curriculum council and speaking to those groups, so that teachers and administrators are becoming more aware that we can't be just talking about a subject here and a career somewhere else, that we need to start making those connections. And so that's been really important. She has also been doing a lot of networking and forming partnerships. Almost the day she stepped into the role, Mrs. Schmitz began to connect with the Chamber of Commerce, and as a result has formed many other partnerships, and again continues to grow those. As I had mentioned a few moments ago, with our 6th graders now using Naviance, counselors and teachers across grades 6 through 12 are gaining a greater understanding of the tool in connection with career readiness and classroom learning. She, as I mentioned, has been speaking at our curriculum council meetings regularly, and our curriculum coordinators have really been doing a lot to contribute to identifying certain evidence that students can demonstrate their awareness of careers. And then she also developed the Career Spotlight to communicate with parents. And this is something that has really become a regular means of communication to let parents know about different opportunities that are coming up for their children. Some of the accomplishments that our district has recognized also as a result of the 339 plan and Mrs. Schmidt's work. The first one that you see on here, the third grade entrepreneurship lesson, you might look at that and think, so what's a lesson? When we went to the IU 2 years ago and we did an analysis of what we had in place in terms of our curriculum and what the standards are, we recognized a very big gap for entrepreneurship, that we're lacking in that in many ways. And so this is one of the ways that we're starting, making sure that that is something that is in elementary and then that it is growing throughout. At the high school level, we're doing more with entrepreneurship course, but we really want to be developing our students to be thinking like entrepreneurs. And so we have that set out ahead of us. The Skyview Career Cafe is something that Mrs. Schmidt's put into effect last year, where she started to invite some different local professionals to come in to explain their work, show examples of their work to our Skyview students during lunch. And students who perhaps thought they wanted to do a certain job maybe came out saying, yeah, I really want to, or no, that really isn't for me, I don't think. And so she's been continuing to bring people in just to give them little insights to what they might want to do. She's also has business representatives coming in to do mock interviews for high school students this spring yet. And we have many job fairs whereby we have employers. She has employers coming into the high school during lunch periods at times to let students know about part-time opportunities that they can have. So in the future, you see here a number of items that we're going to continue to focus on and grow. The connections that have been established and continue to develop will really help us to bring about more opportunities for all of our students, inform some of our curriculum, and again, help to make those connections. Another way that we're really interested in making connections between the workplace and the classroom is through an Educator in the Workplace program. We actually had an opportunity this year and sent 3 of our teachers to Dow for a day for such an experience. They learn certain things about the workplace, and then they come back and they make those connections deliberately with their students between what they're doing in their classroom and what they're going to need to do in the workplace. And we're hoping that throughout the summer and next year, we will have other opportunities for that. And Mrs. Schmidt's will be increasing communication with parents. General information sessions will be held next year. She'll also be making sure to get to all of the home and school meetings. And of course, we'll continue with the Career Spotlight. The last item on there, we had heard from different parents about how good it would be to have a resource list for our 8th grade students doing job shadowing. And so Mrs. Schmidt's is also working on that. So this is a quick overview, like I said, of the 339 and our ongoing work through the K-12 Career Counselor. Following next week, getting board approved, during the first week of April, Mrs. Schmidt's and several of our counselors will be going to North Montco for a showcase along with a couple other districts on the 339 plan. And so at this time, if you have any questions on anything from this or on the plan itself, Mrs. Schmidt's is here this evening. She could certainly answer any questions about the 339 plan, or if you just have any general questions.
Thank you, Dr. Gattona. Are there any questions from members of the board? To my right, Mr. Ryan.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Just 2 quick questions I have. Could you talk a little bit more about the Career Spotlight, what type of communication that is and how that's distributed?
The Career Spotlight communications?
Yes.
It is sent out, how frequently?
Ms. Schmidt, if you wouldn't mind, you might as well. Yeah.
Career Spotlight is sent out every month to month and a half. Sometimes I wait to see what the news is to send out, and it's sent out electronically through School Messenger. Yes.
Okay. And do you get any direct feedback from that?
I do look at the analytics. We have, of course, I think we had about 622 average readers, and I get to see what they're clicking on. I try to highlight, or not try, I do highlight a piece of North Montco. I try to highlight the college counselor, the school counselors dealing, working with the college acceptance, and try to make a nice general newsletter and include elementary, middle, and high school as well.
Okay, great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
My second question is regarding the goals that are established for the plan. It's kind of one of my questions in general. Are the goals clearly defined, and are they measurable?
Well, they're to be SMART goals. This was our first time we actually formally set our goals. We've always had goals for our counseling department. We set some goals that we're going to relook at next year, which we're kind of glad we have a little more knowledge after going through this whole process. So I will tell you they will be more specific and more measurable, but yes, they are.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Winters?
Yeah, thank you. Sorry I missed this at the education meeting. So just for the audience purposes, I've seen Naviance a little bit. Can you explain what Naviance is for the general audience?
Naviance is a platform, an electronic platform that students use to, we're using it to hold their electronic portfolio. So they can take career assessments, we can set up tasks and programs. So when we have a career experience, we can then survey the students, get some feedback, have them connect what they've learned to a future career path. So we're using it also to hold our pieces of evidence for the Future Ready PA Index. In addition, Naviance can be used for college searches, college applications, teachers' letters of recommendation. So there's a lot to be used. I will be meeting again, or have a phone meeting with Naviance for them to review what we've done this year and to see if we're making the best use of Naviance. What are we missing? Is there more that we could be using?
Yeah, what I've seen, it's an excellent tool. So I had some experience with Sauderton on their Pathways program, and one of the things that seemed that Sauderton was seeking in the Pathways program was a lot of guest speakers that could connect the educational aspect to the career. So they were asking if we could bring in a lawyer or somebody in to speak to an English class and how they use writing in their job. So I think I would like to see if there's some more of that connection with the community. So we have an opportunity with Ms. Kelly or with Shenandoah or whatever. There's a huge opportunity to leverage some of the experience of the community into those communications. I know they have it in sixth grade, I think it is, where they have a career day, but I think it even matters in 10th and 11th grade, and you can have some serious conversations on that. So if you have a comment there, I have one more comment then.
My comment is, yes, I want to bring more speakers into our high school and to our middle school. I have some ideas for next year, and maybe we need to do more lunch and learns, where it's one thing to bring speakers into a classroom. That's a wonderful idea if it works with the curriculum and everything that is happening. The other, when I bring them into the Career Center and advertise them, I'm not always getting the number of students to sign up. So I'm trying to figure out the best way to bring these professionals to our students.
Understood. And I think the other part that I don't know if it's really what the state meant for it, but I guess this is what I envisioned for this program, is developing the whole child type of skills that you need in the career workforce that haven't really changed, but they're to emphasize accountability and listening and collaboration and how you're incorporating that through the K-12 program, and I think you're doing that, and I think that's part of the everyday teaching that's going on, but I'd like to see that sort of highlighted a little bit more in the program.
Thank you, and I agree with you, and that's what our business professionals are telling us as well, you know. So it's a huge part of what we're doing, and it's a big part of the elementary curriculum as well. So we might, some of the things that are in their career portfolio, because career portfolios start in kindergarten, they're not, we're moving them to be in electronic form, but they do start in kindergarten, where they decide what are their interests, what school is their job, what do they do in school to, you know, what kind of skills do they have in their job at school. So, thank you.
Any other comments tonight?
Just a couple. I mean, I thank you again, because I heard the presentation at the Education Committee meeting, and if any of the board members, this is the actual plan that, and I know we got it electronically, but if anybody wants it paper copy, I read through mine. And I know we talked at the Education Committee, just, we get so much information, I think, as parents, and I read the first career spotlight, and I only browsed the second career spotlight, and I would imagine some of these opportunities a lot of the high school kids might be aware of through their guidance office, but like I just happened to notice 2 amazing opportunities on here, and then one that was for 10 and 11-year-olds. So I know you had appreciated that. I don't know, because we get so much information, I don't know the best way to get this out. Like, so I don't know if the principals want to attach it to what they do, but I want, because it's new and we're figuring this out, and you've done a great job, and I just would love for people to be more aware, like that there's all these wonderful things that I don't think people are aware of. I mean, I'm glad you got 600 readers from this, but because like I just missed something, and I sit on the Education Committee, and I don't know how we fix that, or fix is the right word, but there's a lot of great information here. And then the only other thing I wanted to ask real quick, because Ms. Drummond and I were at the Tech Center last night, and they mentioned that Solderton teachers had spent 7 or 8 teachers had spent the day, and that they said Methacton is next. So yes. I would assume that's part of your work. So thank you very, very much, because I don't think people can really talk to students about that wonderful opportunity without experiencing it. So that was a big highlight of our meeting last night.
And that came about just recently, so it's not in here anywhere. It was kind of hard for me not to see it in there, because I'm very excited about it. We have 3 middle school teachers and 4 high school teachers going in April.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Reese. Anyone else to my right?
My
Ms.
only
Camper?
other comment would be is when you look at the collaboration with the teachers, don't forget in the art, the music, and because even in art class, you go in elementary, they're putting pictures of what they want to be when they're older, and they're hanging them on the walls when you see it during the Night of the Arts, to just take it that next step, even with even the specials.
And just to be specific about that, such as the curriculum coordinators meetings, such as that, all departments are represented, including specials, and all of those areas have been contributing ideas for evidence and identifying ways that they, within their own curriculum, can make sure that students learn more about opportunities. So, yes, thank you.
If I could just add to that, another thing that we are working on is having that common language. So we do say the word career when we're doing these activities and other things that at first, maybe we don't typically mention. How would you like to have a career? Could you see yourself doing this down the road? So we're trying to use more of a common language. And I will tell you, the staff has really approached me frequently and saying, this is what I'm doing. How can I make it be evidence? And I can't tell you how many times our staff has come to me in all areas, arts and all areas. So it's pretty cool.
Mr. Navarrete.
Hey, first, thank you for everything that you guys are doing in this area. I think this is so critical to making that tie-in, as you said, between, I don't ever want to learn algebra. I don't need to learn algebra in my day-to-day life. Yeah. Those of us with 8th graders at home fight this all the time. But I guess my question, Mike and Paul asked some of them, around communication, right? I know we're trying to find more. Maybe try leveraging the volunteers that we have for other opportunities that are out there, things like the science fair and like just the other organizations that are pulling people in, especially when they can be tied back to a career. I'm sure a lot of those people would probably want to come in and talk about what they do. In fact, I'm kicking myself right now for not getting to my kids' science teachers to talk about my job. It's an email tomorrow. Excuse me, I'm all tongue-tied. The other question I had was around the entrepreneurship lessons. Mary touched on it. Can you talk about what we're doing in that space?
Well, we're talking about it, which is important, and we're planning. But another area that we approached entrepreneurship was our 9th grade Futures Expo. We moved that from being an extension of our career days that start in elementary school, and we turned it into a future thinking expo. So our students each had a strand where they talked to a local entrepreneur. And the students reflected on the characteristics, the personal characteristics that it takes to be an entrepreneur. And so that was another way we reached all of our 9th graders in entrepreneurship. Okay. But it is certainly something we continue to think about.
Great, thanks.
Any members on my left?
Thank you both for all of this information. I'm really excited to see the work that we've done so far with this program and to see where it's going in the next few years. I noticed on slides 6 and 7, there's a couple of places where we talk about parental involvement and community involvement, and I know we're talking about different ways to reach people and communicate the information. So for anyone who's just hearing about this K-12 counseling and career readiness and the the 339 plan here tonight, thinking to themselves, yes, I want to get involved with this. I have a great opportunity I'd like to share with the district. What's the best way for people to get involved?
I think it depends on what they're comfortable with, because we have a lot of opportunities, and it starts in elementary, middle, and high school. So in the Career Spotlight, I asked for volunteers, and I need to do that again because I got some parents who are human resource professionals who are doing our mock interviews with the students. So a former school board member reached out to me with the expertise that she had. So I can use people in many different ways. They can mentor students, they can job shadow students, they can speak to a class, they can provide a field trip opportunity for us. So it's really limitless. But I do need to reach out again and again.
Yeah, I would just encourage that if there's anybody who's here tonight or people watching the video at home later, if they are interested in getting involved in this program, they can, I guess, reach out to you, Ms. Schmidt.
Absolutely.
Judy, would you speak into the microphone and tell everybody your email address, please?
My email address is jschmitz, SCHMITZ, @methacton.org.
Thank you very much. Anyone else?
Hi, thank you for putting this together and all the work that you're doing around career readiness for the district. I just had a question about Naviance, which I understand is for the students to use, and that the parents can look at what the students are doing in Naviance using the student's login. But I guess I just wish that there was, or maybe could there be a mechanism where the parents, it doesn't have to be separate from the student, or they can be maybe apprised of information that's in Naviance, or somehow more enlightened about what's going on with this aspect of their students' education. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Anyone else? If not?
Yes, I will have that conversation and, start thinking about how, if I want to reach out with parents, that's another avenue I need to reach out to them.
Thank you, Ms. Schmitz. Thank you, Dr. Katona. This item is on the agenda under 11C for your consideration next week. Next on the agenda, we have master plan, and we actually have 2 items in a row. We have master plan items which are listed on the agenda this evening under 9J. They're summer 2019 master plan projects. There are 2 of them. And then following that is the Arrowhead Design Professional recommendation by Mr. Fretz and Dan Sakala from Fidavia. Mr. Fretz?
Good evening. Tonight we'll be asking to review approve David Maines Associates of Lewistown, PA in the amount of $534,393, which includes a base bid of $484,428. Alternate number 2 in the amount of $41,465, and alternate number 3 in the amount of $8,500 to complete the roofing work, and the Thackton High School contracts would be pending the solicitor's review. Also, number 2 was approve J.M. Young and Sons of Bellevue, PA in the amount of $897,015 to complete the roofing work at the Arcola Intermediate. That's what we would be asking for. And did anyone have any questions about those particular items?
Any questions, or how about we go to my left? Ms. Aubrey-Larsenis?
So when we say contract is pending solicitor review, I'm assuming that will be before the 26th?
We cannot,
I didn't hear the question.
she wants to know whether or not the contract will be approved or reviewed by the solicitor before the 26th. And I can't say that it will. I don't know if we have the official contract drawn up at this moment in time, do we?
No, but it's customary after the board votes to award, we will tell the contractor that they have been awarded per the board meeting, subject to execution of a contract, and it's typical for the contract to follow sometimes weeks thereafter. So are you asking out of concern about slowing the work down, or?
No, my concern is just voting for something before the solicitor has approved it.
That's customary language. That's how we handle it elsewhere. We've handled it here in the past. It's a way of saying that they are the low bidder, the lowest responsible bidder, but they still have to execute a contract, and the solicitor has the authority to approve that.
Any other questions to my left? Mr. Renishaw?
I mean, to further answer it, the contract is in the bid documents, so the form is there. It's just a matter of execution. But we just don't have that authority. We usually delegate that customarily to the solicitor.
Regarding item 1, can you provide some information on what alternate 2 and alternate 3 are?
Certainly. Alternate number 2 and number 3 referred to, I believe, was roof 16. It was the pool equipment room at the high school that was broken out separately, and because it had some other work associated with it. And both those bids had, the first one, I believe, had to do with the actual roofing, and the second part of that had to do with some painting and some steel work, remedial steel work that had to happen in that location.
Okay. And then regarding item 2, the references to Skyview, is that the part of Skyview that used to be part of Arcola?
It's a number of roofs associated there. I believe it's 9 roofs in total at the Skyview Arcola campus. And their sections of the roofs are all delineated.
Okay, but, I mean, when was Skyview built again?
It's not part of the Skyview.
It's not part of the new construction, okay.
Yeah, Brian, if I can add to that, there's one section of roof in the Skyola part in that facility assessment, or in the roof assessment.
That's what I thought, but I just want to confirm that.
Yeah, there's one section.
This is part of the old building from 19 whatever.
Yes. Well, this roof was redone as of 2009. So it is not an original roof.
So it's only got 10 years life out of that roof?
You guys can comment on the specifics of the roof assessment on it, but that's the date that's that's the latest date for work on that roof. Now, whether that was some work that was done on it or
was it,
that was a
if it was
completely
repaired, that's different, but was it replaced in 09?
Yeah, in the roof assessment, it says 2009.
So honestly, it's a little bit tough to hear up here the way it's bouncing around. So your question was?
The question was, Ralph mentioned that this roof either had work done on it or was replaced in 2009. And if it was replaced in 2009, a 10-year life seems kind of short. And is that within warranty of when it was done, or was the 09 work repairs or something else?
Two things about it. One, the roof warranties, so to say, were broken out not the same way as we have these roofs broken out right now.
Mark, I have the details. I have it written down here, sorry. Yeah. So Brian, the last work was done in 2009, and I believe Dan, I had asked you about this before. This is why I have it written down here. 2009 was the date of the last aluminum roof coating. The actual roof underneath of that work is 30-plus years old. That's the difference. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
And the coating extends the warranty 10 years. I just wanted to point out as a footnote, I mean, this is all work that was approved last year when you approved 2019's master plan. The budget for this work was $1,434,200, and we actually bid it two ways. We bid it as a separate bid and also as a combined bid to see if we could get better competition. We had 14 people show up for the walkthrough, and 5 people eventually submit, and the sum of the two items combined is $1,431,408, or $2,792 under budget, so that one was really close. We were very happy.
Any other comments, Mr. Anichel? Okay. Anyone to my right? Mr. Ryan?
Thank you for the comment regarding where we were with the budget. That was my first question. The second one was, where does this put us in terms of summary fashion with where we stand now with the roofing projects? You know, what percentage of projects have we had with this work completed at the high school? What percentage do we have left for both the high school and the Skyview Arcola campus?
I believe after this summer, the F roofs that we had rated F will be taken care of at those locations.
Thank you.
Anyone else to my right? Mr. Winters?
Yeah, I just want, I was going to ask that exact same question, but I just want to point out that highlight that the rating of the roofs, I assume, go from A to F. Is that correct? And we are 2 years into replacing roofs that are defined as F over the last number of years that have not been maintained, and hopefully we can get to the Ds, E's and D's next year. So it's good news, but it also shows with a long way up.
Anyone else to my right? Mr. Navarrete?
Yeah, just to clarify some of that, there are still a couple of F-rated roofs at Arcola that will need to be done. The high school, we are complete with the Fs. Part of the work that we're going to undertake this summer is also a more extensive, and I believe did we approve this last month? I know we talked about it. What's that? No. Part of the work, and I don't know whether we've already approved it because all the meetings are starting to run together, but was to have the consultant come back in and take a closer look at those D-rated roofs throughout the district in order to avoid the surprises that we found at the high school last year, where we had to spend an extra, what was it, $150,000, I believe, because of underlying decking problems that weren't found in the initial survey. So they're going through and doing some additional coring work, sampling, as well as IR surveys to be able to see where we might have saturated roofs and leaks so that we can identify these problems ahead of time.
Yeah, no, we just Mr. Navarrete, just so you know, while we talked about that at Property Committee, that is not on the agenda for your approval. I think the Fidavia and Mr. Fretz want to go back and review that to tighten up that proposal before bringing it to the board for consideration. But you're absolutely right. That's exactly what we want to do, and we're likely to be back at Property Committee in next month. Any other comments on those two agenda items? If not, they're listed under 9J on the agenda. The next item on the agenda is the Arrowhead Design Professional Recommendation, and Dan Sakala is here. Dan, if you wouldn't mind, if you could take the board through, the process that we went through and talk about the firms and a number of firms that had responded to this, and talk about the process to come to our recommendation here this evening for their consideration next week.
Sure. Hello again. So, absent or subject to your vote, we just completed what I think is a very successful selection of a design professional for purposes of doing a feasibility phase study of this building and the campus in general. It's item F on the agenda, 9F. to approve the firm of KCBA Architects of Hatfield, PA, to provide professional feasibility phase design services in connection with this building in the amount of $8,750. And as Dr. Zerbe requested, I'm just going to take you through the process briefly. We started about a month and a half ago where we sought to identify, well, first we had to come up with the RFP process. So we created a process, a customized RFP that was very, very specific to this building. It started out, I'll just read the introduction to it. Methacton seeks, and I'll do it in a redacted form, seeks proposals from qualified architectural firms to provide professional feasibility phase design services for extensive renovations and/or additions and/or replacement and related work at its Arrowhead Elementary School campus as further described below. And again, it was a very detailed RFP that talked about the campus in general. It shared the previous assessment that was done in 2016 as it pertained to this building. And it talked about an inclusive process with all stakeholders involved that would, again, I'm summarizing, of course, that would look at all the hopes, dreams, and aspirations of your community for this campus, and through a design-down charrette inclusive process, bring you to the point that you're starting to develop options and whittle those options down to the best options, and then from theoretically the end of this month, sometime when you award the next meeting, to the sometime in September, be able to bring it back to the board at large at that point. But again, there's going to be lots of meetings. The process is pretty exhaustive, very inclusive, very transparent. It's really a great process. We sat down ourselves in the district and reviewed all the architects in the space that were appropriate for this kind of a project that we have positive experience with, that the district has positive experience with, and we narrowed it down to 7 firms that we submitted that we gave the RFP to. Those firms were AEM Architects, Breslin Architects, Crabtree Rohrbaugh Architects, Gilbert Architects, KCBA, Kimmel Beaugret, and RLPS. And all the firms were very enthusiastic about it. It was a very concise process. The proposals were due this past Thursday, and we as a team came up with 25 questions that were derived directly from, actually about 20 of them came directly from the RFP, and then 5 others we added that allowed us to grade the 7 proposals. And after that process, we had 3 very clear finalists. And again, this was all part of the outline process that was in the RFP. We conducted interviews yesterday. Mr. Fretz, myself, my colleague Don Kozer, an engineer, Dr. Sosnovic, and Mary Hull. And as part of that process, each firm had 30 minutes to present, followed by a 15-minute question and answer session. We actually did not talk about fee until we concluded the process, and I don't want to speak for anyone, but it was a unanimous, first of all, it was very positive. All 3 firms, the finalists were Kimmel Beaugret, RLPS, and KCBA. And I think we all felt that all 3 firms were very competent and capable professional firms, but there was a clear winner when the process was concluded. It was KCBA. A few sort of salient items that came out of that: why KCBA, their emphasis on safety and security, willingness to make as many presentations as necessary in order to accomplish a successful feasibility phase, a tremendous book of successful experience with K-12 work in and around the county, and lastly, they did spend a decent amount of time researching the district, the campus, and proposed a handful of really concrete concepts just right out of the gate as part of their presentation. So it really was an excellent process. Then at the end of it, we talked about fee, and as icing on the cake, they happened to be, of the 3 finalists, they were the low fee. So that's kind of like a sort of a summary of the whole process. if anybody has any questions, or Mary, you want to, Dr.
Yeah, but, yeah.
I just want to say thank you for the work in getting us the 3 candidates to interview. I do think that it was clear after it was concluded that there was a lead here, and it is KCBA. I was especially impressed with the information that they had regarding school safety. They have a safety-trained specialist who will actually be our lead in this project. They directly discussed a renovation of an open pod concept in some of the work that they've done in the past. They've done work with Lower Providence. They know the area well. They addressed 21st century learning environments, and I just found them to be, I think, the best partner for us to administer a comprehensive analysis.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Hall, and thank you for volunteering your time with that process. Other members to my right, any other questions? Mr. Ryan?
You answered my one question in terms of they were the low fee as well. On top of them being the best qualified, in your opinion, they were the lowest fee.
That was icing, and again, critically, we chose not to discuss fees with Ms. Hull or Dr. Sosnovic before we went through the whole process, just to sort of just make it based on the merits and then discuss the fee afterward, and coincidentally, they were also the low.
Okay. Yeah, the proposal that we see here, the 67-page proposal, is very impressive. The scope of work that they've done in Montgomery County alone is quite impressive. I did just want to clarify the one thing that they do talk about the scope of the work, and I believe that there was 9 different items in there. They do mention, the town hall meetings. I don't know if that was discussed amongst the administration and the board, or if they know, but as many town halls as needed. I just want to make sure that really is included in the price there. And do we have an idea of what we're looking at in terms of that?
Sure.
Are we that far along?
Well, I think what we've done, and you'll see later this evening when we start our discussion about the path forward, we had posted for the public to see a general draft outline of a timeline to get us to a decision point in October of 2019. And in there, between, I believe, March, April, and May, there were a number of meetings listed. But again, that timeline was built, from my conversations with Vidavia and our team, and we now need to take that timeline, or at least our thoughts, and join with this firm and decide what is the best path forward if this timeline that we have isn't, and the steps and the town halls and all that. I think we need to get their expertise as part of this process to refine a timeline and the steps. So we haven't done that yet. We've just, finished the interviews on Monday. We're presenting this to you this evening. There's a number of other conversations that need to occur before we get them to a revised timeline. But I think it's important that we take their lead in the expertise that they have and their experience.
Thank you. Sorry, I do have one more question. Did I see, is the traffic flow or vehicle circulation included in this as well for this campus?
It's a pretty comprehensive feasibility study, and it's not just a building, it is the entire campus.
It is the whole.
So yeah, it is comprehensive. And just as a kind of a footnote, as I mentioned, they did use the words unlimited meetings. We had to, in order to come up with a price, we had to sort of discuss with the administration like a ballpark of how many meetings so that the proposers could put a price to that. But again, we're comfortable. They volunteered it. We didn't persuade them. You'll get the meetings that you require to get to where you need to be. It won't be a situation of us coming back and talking about additional expenses to do that.
Great. Thank you to all who were involved in the process.
Anyone else to my right? Mr. Navarrete?
Hey guys, thanks very much for the speed with which this was done to get this process moving. I know that's one thing I complain about all the time up here. I will say as Mike said, I was impressed with the proposal that they put forward. Not only the work that they've done specifically in K-12, but they've done it here in Montgomery County. They've done it with our neighbors. They included letters of recommendation from business managers and superintendents throughout the county. I mean, I don't know, what was there, 6 or 8 different letters in there at least, and that spoke to specific issues and specific parts of their work that they were impressed with. And I think the other thing that's worth noting in full disclosure is that one of the project planners is actually an Arrowhead parent, which I think is an interesting twist to this, certainly, and the fact that we have somebody here with a vested interest in the outcome of this project who would actually be working on it. So that's a nice bonus, in my opinion.
Any comments from members of the board from my left?
Thank you again for all of your work on this. I think one of the things that was worth noting in looking through the proposal that they had sent was not only do they have experience with construction, they have experience with renovation, they have experience working on schools while they are occupied, and all of the maneuverings that are involved in that sort of a project. And they also have experience with sort of a hybrid model of renovating and rebuilding at the same time. So I think that whatever path we choose forward from here, it sounds like we have a firm that is going to be able to work with us and come up with exactly what our district needs. So I concur. I think that this was the right choice. Thank you.
Any other comments? If not, any other comments? All right, well, thank you. This item is on 9F on the agenda for your consideration on next Tuesday evening. With that, I'm going to take to the podium, and we're going to go to the Arrowhead Forward board discussion. Again, good evening. And it's my pleasure to talk about an opportunity for us as a board to take an initial step in the conversation about the Arrowhead Elementary School and looking forward. So this evening, I want to share just a few simple reminders of where we are, how we got here, and what the purpose is of tonight's meeting is all about. So the purpose of tonight's meeting is, as you know, the Board of School Directors are in a process of considering renovations, new construction, or a combination thereof for the Arrowhead Elementary School. And as such, they need to be allowed an opportunity to provide initial input on matters that should be considered as this process proceeds. I think it's really important also to recognize that this will likely not be the only time that the board will be weighing in on matters, and certainly, as Mr. Sakala mentioned earlier, this won't be the only time that a conversation about what we should do and how we should do it to be considered, with input from the public, input from professionals, input from the administration, and input from the board will all be considered as we proceed. I think it's important to understand, just in summary, where we've been and how we got here. So generally speaking, we had a facilities assessment that was completed in April of 2016. That assessment was of all district facilities. It included Arrowhead, and a revised update to that assessment was done in 2018, of which it's estimated about $14 million worth of renovations are needed in the next 3 to 5 years. So generally speaking, that's the impetus of why we're here. So how do we address not only all of our facilities in the district, but seriously, how do we address the need for the Arrowhead Elementary School in the next 3 to 5 years? So we went through a school consolidation process back in 2016, and that resulted in the closure of Audubon. We created then a facilities master plan that allowed us to start the work needed, as I think as Mr. Winters might have mentioned earlier. We have a number of F roofs. Well, we started that process. This board has moved forward with addressing a number of the items that were on that facilities assessment plan, and are continuing to annually look at ways to address those long-standing facilities needs. And then in November of 2018, I presented in front of the board basically the state of the district. We talked about a number of things, and a slide that will precede this will talk a little bit more detail about that presentation. And then again in January, we had an Arrowhead discussion and a recommendation. And from that recommendation, at the January 22nd, 2019 meeting of the board approved a resolution to continue Arrowhead Elementary School as a school building. As such, February 2019, I recommended a timeline, and that timeline, along with the design professional needed to help us move the discussion forward, is part of what you heard here this evening. And lastly, you can see that we have received some initial input from the staff at Audubon, or at Arrowhead, and as well, we're here at March to discuss the considerations for the path forward. So just to kind of in summary, when we talk about a facilities assessment, on the left-hand side of this screen, you can see that there is a district overview of each building and what the estimated costs were associated with the facilities needs. On the right-hand side is really a synopsis of the $14 million needed to address Arrowhead Elementary School. This presentation, along with any other comments that we take this evening on the Arrowhead project, as well as the process going forward and any other presentations, are all going to be on the district website under methacton.org/Arrowhead Forward. So you'll be able to find all this information there and keep track of the conversation. So in summary of that November 8th presentation, we talked about a number of things. Obviously, the need to maintain our facilities is really grounded in the mission, vision, and the core values of this district. Along with that, we need to consider the core academic programs and services that are needed to make the most of our opportunity before the students in K through 12. We considered the current enrollment and class sizes. We looked at the organizational structure and the staffing that supports the programs and services. We also looked at the facilities and the use of those facilities, along with the discussion about finances. How would we be able to pay for renovations or pay for new construction? So that was discussed. We talked about the reliance on our path forward under the strategic planning process. It's a process that we take seriously, and we communicate back with the community, and we gather input from the community. So that plan is a living document that we update regularly, and we'll be giving you a state of that plan in April, as we do annually. Opportunities, we talked about opportunities and challenges. Certainly, when we talk about the renovation of a building or the construction of a building, there are a number of opportunities that might be before us. Can we not only create a building that's appropriate for our students, but is there some other extra value that might come of it that might be useful to the community in some way? So all those types of things were discussed. We talked about the challenges of new construction or a renovation. And lastly, we talked about the fundamental basis that enrollment projections are a big part of this decision process. And then in January of 2019, we talked about a number of things. We talked about, on the left-hand side, I presented 6 options for school configurations given the projected enrollment. As you can see on the little map to the right, there are a number of areas within the Methacton School District, in Worcester Township, as well as in Lower Providence Township, where there is planned and currently development occurring, meaning new homes, single-family homes, as well as attached family dwellings as well. So with that, we presented 6 options for consideration, meaning that of all the buildings in the district, we would maintain the 7 buildings with the current school and grade configurations, where our elementary schools are grades K through 4, our Skyview Upper Elementary School is grade 5 and 6, our Kohler Intermediate School grade 7 and 8, and the high school grade 9 through 12. Then there were a couple other options based on discussions about how we could potentially utilize our facilities in different ways. And those options are listed there. At the end of the evening and in January 22nd of 2019, the board passed a resolution whereby if considering the continuing use of Arrowhead Elementary School, we would be looking at something like the last option, where there be 4 elementary schools, K through 3, Skyview 4 or 5, Arcola 6 through 8 configuration, and high school 9 through 12, or under the current school configuration. Those are the 2 options that included the remaining, having Arrowhead remain as a building. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's how this will all turn out. That was the discussion then. As we continue to get input and as the board considers all the information, there may be other scenarios that we haven't thought of, but this is where we were then, and we'll use that information as a basis to continue the discussion. So the path forward, I mentioned earlier that there was a timeline put together, and that timeline is posted on the Methacton website. And certainly, it's not an end-all to, exactly when meetings are occurring, but once this design professional is approved, if they are approved next week, we would sit down and work with them to more specifically outline the opportunities, not only for talking about debt and funding analysis, but talk about all the opportunities here where we talk about staff input, public input, tours of other schools and our schools, targeted, looking at board goals, the regional district building tours, community input meetings. This is probably where we're talking about the town hall type scenarios, community survey, and a number of opportunities for communication, a look at gathering that information by the design professional and presenting something back to the board with cost options and other things to consider from all the input. And lastly, and as of right now, talk about an October 2019 opportunity to say, okay, this is the path forward. And depending on what that decision is, it may require additional planning. It may not necessarily mean that by November we're starting to break ground or we're starting, to mobilize construction. It just means that, hey, we are at a point to say, you know what, we're going to renovate, we're going to build, or we're going to do a combination thereof, or we may find out in October that, you know what, we need more information, or we need to do something in addition to make sure that we have this all in line for the best path forward. So the discussion here this evening, and I've asked our coordinator of school and community information, Ms. Amanda Kelly, to join me. She is going to take over the laptop in just a second, and she's going to start taking notes as we start having a discussion about the path forward and things that the board would like to have considered as we go through this. But before we start, and Ms. Kelly, if you'd like, what we'll do is you can start getting prepared, and I just want to address the board before we start talking. So before we begin, just remember there's no wrong or right suggestion here. I mean, these are initial suggestions, and just because we make those comments today, they may not necessarily materialize further after this evening. They may not necessarily materialize in the conversations that we have going forward, but it is a starting point, and anything is open. And again, this is just a simple opportunity for us to start this discussion. The board hasn't had this opportunity. The administration has provided them some input. We've also provided them some input that we got from the staff here at Arrowhead. So with that stuff considered, the board will have some comments here this evening. And lastly, I think it's also important that we remember that these matters, may come in at a high level concepts, but there might be also some thoughts about some really specific things that are really particular, and that's okay. And what we'll try to do is we'll take the notes here so that everybody can follow along with us, and then after that we will try to summarize this and probably take the information and say the big picture items we'll put in one column, and some of the more minutia type items we'll go put over here so that we can maintain focus on the path forward. And we'll certainly share this not only with the public, but share this with hopefully the approved design professionals. So with that said, remember, our conversation here isn't just about facilities. I tried to, our conversation all along has been about, while we need to address the facility, It's not the facilities don't exist just to be on this land. The facilities exist to provide programs and services for our students. So while you may hear a number of things on programs, services, certain aspects of the facilities, it's all an important piece for consideration. So with that said, I'm going to ask for volunteers to step forward. Ms. Arbelar-Sonis?
I just wanted to ask the board as we get started with this, if we could, in corresponding with one of our board members, ask that we start at more of the high level and more of the, I guess, program level and see, I know we can't control exactly in what order the ideas are coming to us here, because I do want this to be more of an organic brainstorming session, but let's try and start at the high level before we get too far into the weeds, just to give us a little bit of focus to our discussion, because I know as a group we tend to be a little wordy and maybe get a little off track. So.
All
right, fine, then I will go first. I think that whatever space we renovate or rebuild, we need to make sure that we have a plan in place for full-day kindergarten. Full-day kindergarten for our district is a question of when and not if, as far as I'm concerned. So I think that whatever path forward we decide on, we need to make sure that there is space to allow for that.
And just so you know, I'm not trying to validate every comment that's being made, but just to that particular point, I mean, it's been on the governor's desk for a number of years now about mandating full-day kindergarten. So I just wanted to add to that.
All right, I'll jump in here. First, I do want to just mention, we briefly talked about this, but this is the effort of the Methacton School Board and transparency here. We want to make sure that the discussion tonight, the ideas, the brainstorming is happening in front of the public. There's no discussions behind. We don't have any preconceived ideas. As you can tell now, people are up here writing down notes of what to talk about. We thought that that was an important part of this entire process, that this discussion happens in front of the public, in front of our taxpayers, in front of our parents, in front of our teachers. So I just want to make that point. A couple things. The board did, the majority of the board did tour the Skyview and Arcola buildings again. We had been talking about walking through those buildings during the daytime when the students are actually in there to see what rooms are open, what rooms are being used for other purposes other than instructional classrooms. And it was a very interesting thing to see the kids moving from class to class and what they are doing with the actual classrooms. I thought it was despite, excuse me, my voice is going tonight. Despite the fact that we've been in these buildings before, it was great to actually see the students in the process. A couple things that I guess I'm kind of looking forward in terms of next steps is I feel we still need the educational recommendation from the administration in terms of here's our vision for the education in Methacton for the next 5 to 10 years and what facilities work with that. What is the best? We had heard, I went back and looked at, when they built Skyview, what was the best configuration? And there was a lot of talk about what grades are working best based off of age and appropriateness. That was the idea that, fifth graders are more like sixth graders than they are fourth graders. And it was, the different talks about that. You can still find these documents online. They're still out there. So I would like to see what the current administration's recommendation is along those lines in terms of what is the best educational alignment of grades. Take the space out, take the capacity out, and give a recommendation based off of if we had the best case scenario, we had the finances to fund anything, what would you do, right? And then maybe the second part of that is, okay, we don't have everything. We don't have the finances to do, the pie in the sky. But an educated guess off of, we can probably do this with the funding that we have, and we think that this would be the best. And I think Mr. Winters has done a good job of talking about that in the past. A couple little side notes here. Finances, I know that's part of, I guess, the talk of the Finance Committee moving forward. I think that that's a large part of our discussion, because if we're just going to rehab the building, we can do it just like every other building that we're doing now. We can fit it into the bond funding that we're doing each year. We can fit it in over the next couple of years. I don't really have questions about that. My question would be is, if we go ahead with a $15 million addition to the building, above and beyond any other repairs, or if we build new, how does that new money fit into existing projects scheduled in the upcoming years that are already part of the schedule? I guess that kind of gets to Mark Fretz and Dan Chicala. What do we do then? Because now we have double the borrowing almost, and trying to work it out at the same time. Just some other things to talk about. I'm glad Kim brought up the full-day kindergarten part. I do think that that needs to be part of the discussion. To be honest, I don't know which way I will fall on that. I think that there are definite benefits to it, but the cost, can we afford it? Do we have the space for it? How will that factor in there? And I will stop talking for a while and let someone else go.
I think it was apparent in interviews yesterday that the school was built at a time when the trend was the open concept. And I think that we have to take a look at what actually is a 21st century learning environment and what enables our students to best learn. And if our building can be easily adapted to things that they talked about were like acoustics, the impact of natural light on students, technology integration, and active learning spaces for large and small groups. So I think those are things to take into consideration if we can adapt the building to fit into our current model and to have it continue to fit moving forward as times change.
There's so much to talk about, so I almost don't know where to begin, but I will say that you can't talk about the past, but you need to learn from it. Although I've been in Arcola and Skyview as a parent, as a community member, as a school board director touring it when we first got on the board, seeing it from the perspective of just looking at vacancy and just looking at what's there, I was shocked. And I don't want to be negative, but I feel like the Skyview addition, I don't want to say it was a waste because we're using it, but I was blown away by how much of the current Skyview was the old Arcola. And I look at all these other options that we've talked about in the past, and I'm like, it's not plausible, and when we talk about the big picture here, everyone knows I'm here because I'm an educator, and I was worried about where education was going in Pennsylvania, and more importantly, where I live. And now that I've been here almost 4 years, seeing it, in the trenches, other than actually being in the classroom with Acton all day long, we have a remarkable school district. And what makes it remarkable is we are still being progressive. And I looked at Arcola and I looked at Skyview and I was like, wow. Because I work in a building that is a somewhat similar to Skyview Arcola, two different, and I was like, wow. There's some really amazing things going on here. So I think I finally wanted that tour to get that out of our mind. Because in an ideal world, I was thinking, oh great, we can do K-3 even if we do renovate this and we can move this here, and I just don't see it being possible and keeping our great education the way it is. On the other hand, it's very stressful to make these really, even the phone system might only be $500,000, but it's not easy to say, we know we need it. We've talked about it for hours at property. We're talking about it tonight. We'll probably vote yes next week. Those are very stressful decisions, knowing that our funding is coming from mostly property taxes. And it doesn't look like it's coming from anywhere else anytime soon. So having said that, going back, thinking about full-day kindergarten, and when I looked at the proposal today that was sent, and I was like, wow, this looks like a really innovative company. I would like to kind of see how plausible it is to keep some of the bones of this. Because you know what? I mean, it's only 40-some years old. And it hasn't been kept up, that's why we're working on this facility program, but in what world do you just demolish a 40-year-old building? Now, I know it's used differently than a home and things like that, but that doesn't seem smart to me. But I don't know, like we said, that's why we're doing this, having this design company. But to me, and I heard hours upon hours of people talking about how wonderful Arrowhead is. You know, yes, we have to think about safety, and yes, we have to think about that. Well, I will reiterate again, and I meant to do a little more research, but, you know, and I don't want to speak for sure, but when I worked at Radnor, they have 3 very different elementary buildings. They have one that was brand new and green and top of the line. They had one that was, I would call, like your average elementary school, and then they had Ithan that was open concept. Now, what I forgot to do was double check if Ithan is still Ithan. It was very open concept, you know. So I just feel like it's very hard to be, you know, cost conscious and keep education the same. But Methacton has done it and has done it well, and we need to keep doing that. So I'm glad that we're here discussing. I hope that we can put it to rest in terms of everything else other than me thinking about full-day kindergarten and what's plausible there, and focus on what we need to do here and go from there.
Thank you. Other comments?
Yeah, so one of the things that I've noticed in spending times in these schools, and particularly came to light visiting Skyview and Arcola last week, is that these buildings are just buildings. What makes them so amazing is the work that's being done within them. Some of the things that really struck me in Arcola was the creative utilization of space. And so I think that whatever work we do here, you know, while it's wonderful to have certain types of technologies and things like that available in the classroom, I think that a less is more approach to the space to give our staff the flexibility to be creative with it. You know, having dividers available so that, you know, we can customize space to the needs of different programs. And just having less built into the rooms. One, it could be a cost savings, but 2, it gives us the opportunity to innovate and grow as time goes on. So that's something that I think I'd like to see in whatever path we take forward from here.
Thank you. Ms. Drummond?
Yeah, I agree with Kim. My thought around this has to do a lot with flexibility of space, flexibility for small groups, for group counseling or other programs, or also flexibility to have larger collaborative spaces for the students. So I think flexibility in the spaces is really important. And also, I would love to see something innovative around energy efficiency with the new building.
Other comments from members of the board? I'm sorry. Ms. Cancro, you were fast. You were faster.
I'm the faster. So, you know, what I look at is our strategic plan is all about developing the whole child. So where we need to improve in is going in and doing the inclusion, having class sizes that are not 25, but my preference would be 20 to 22, but having the inclusion for the children so that they could have differential learning. So with that, the classroom can't be just so small and packed in with children, allows them the opportunity to be within the classroom in small group learning and being able to work with the group of whatever child specialized in. Along with that, I think we look at mental health and I look at behavioral, and when we looked at the REACH and the success program that we've brought into there, one of the things that we discussed is we would want REACH to reach all of our ages. And it really does start at an early age. So providing space where behavioral, mental health can be provided, the emotional support. And then I also look at the therapies, not having speech in a closet or physical therapy or occupational, providing them a little bit of quieter moments that they get that they aren't able to get when they're in a large classroom. So I think that is very important. I also look at science when we look at STEM, and STEM having innovative science programs. When you look at the high schoolers have opportunity to work in great labs. Why wait till high school? We're talking about career readiness. Bring the labs down as low as at early age. Slime is on the rise. It's one of those things. Let's get hands-on in science. And then the last thing I think is important is when we talk about community, I think gym space. I think one of the biggest things that I find, ARA is a great organization, for example. Their basketball courts, we only have the opportunity that they could play a game. So we have over 1,000 children involved in basketball, and they can't even practice or do, and there's also a limit of the amount of children that can participate because there's not access in our gyms. So this gym alone is rarely used. We don't have enough access. So creating gym space, improving our outdoor space as well. So those are my inputs.
Thank you. And just a clarification, I don't think this gym is actually used by ARA. Yeah, so this is one that's not used. I just want to be clear. Mr. Earnshaw?
Yeah, just two questions to start. On the the schedule that was in the presentation, it referenced a debt and funding analysis for this month. Is that available or will be available next week?
I think that, if it's possible, we may have that available to share at the voting meeting next week. We certainly don't have that right now. We may need to adjust the schedule to have that fit in possibly next month.
Okay, because obviously that's a key component of anything that we're doing.
Understood.
And then my second question at this point is, I was unable to go on the tour of Skyview and Arcola. Could someone who did, give me an idea of what you found with regard to capacity? Because I remember your presentation had about 58% utilization, somewhere around 60, if I remember correctly?
That's correct.
Is that what people saw, or does that need to be revisited, or where did that come out?
Yeah, I can start. I know that some people took notes during the tour, but I will say, yes, there is available space at Skyview and Arcola. There is a handful of rooms that are empty at Arcola, a smaller handful of rooms that are probably not used at Skyview. Is it enough to accommodate a full grade? Even if you combine those two, absolutely not. That's my personal assessment just in looking at it. Yes, there are spaces available, but it's the layout of the school, the configuration of where these vacant rooms are right now, it presents a lot of challenges for how they can be utilized. There's a section of Arcola that is the former 6th grade wing. It has a smaller than typical hallway, so it makes switching between classes a challenge. It's out of the way of the rest of the school. It would be seen as a less desirable location, so there's certain services we could never provide in that part of the school. So yes, there is some available space, but what we can do with that space is a big challenge.
But that conclusion is based on the current configuration as opposed to possibly an alternate configuration.
When you say alternate configuration, are you talking about like moving fourth grade?
If you spend some money to move walls.
That's a big ask. Only because I can't tell by looking at them if they're load-bearing walls, whether or not you can move walls and things of that nature.
Nobody's going down that road as part of
right.
What you guys okay.
Yeah, yes, you could reconfigure some of the individual rooms, but things like the width of the hallway and things that the location of these classrooms, I don't know. It would not be something that could be done simply. Whether it could be done at all, it certainly would be worth exploring, but I don't know what kind of cost we would incur going down that road.
And Brian, just to piggyback on Kim, I went there wanting to be able to reconfigure that building. That's what I went there for. And I work in a building called they call it the Flex building. So it was kind of built so you could reconfigure it. Like there's even space on the one side to put lockers, but they didn't put lockers there, for example. I mean, even the door, even getting from Arcola to Skyview was that little hallway. No, I'm not saying you can't blow that out. I mean, architecturally, I'm not sure. But I kind of left there, and I don't want to bash anybody, but I left there angry. I left there angry that they built it the way that they did when they did. And I remember, and the gentleman is here in the audience, going to vote, and I think I was pregnant, so I think I was grumpy, and said to him, I don't really care about the building right now. I'm going to vote, or something. And it was not built efficiently, and what I mean, and I was shocked. Like, it's hard to explain, but some of the Skyview classrooms were Arcola classrooms. It's a full-on, lots of classrooms. I mean, and the doorway, because where I work, you can literally walk very easily from one side to the other. It's like it's the same hallway. It's a huge, huge hallway. This was a heavy double door. And it was just it was very eye-opening. And you wouldn't think you would know. I had toured that building before, but not looking at it to reconfigure. I'm not saying, like you said, it can't be done, but I really went there hoping, okay, this might be our fix. And we can have full-day kindergarten and do K to 3 and really, do everything we want to do.
Just one more thing for Brian's point there. I kind of went with the same idea of, can we make realignment work at all based off of the open spaces that we saw there? And just some of the rough numbers, there's no way that they can physically add up. I went and looked at our enrollment report that we have to kind of look at, what do we have in the pipeline for K through 4? What's our lowest class, right? So if we did this at the lowest point of enrollment, it is our current second grade class of 334 students, right? So if you did it when they got into 4th grade and moved 4th grade up, right? So that's the year you do it. So you have 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 on Skyview and Arcola's campus. To move 4th grade up with our current class size policy of 25 students, you need an additional 14 classrooms. There's not 14 classrooms without affecting the educational program that we're delivering there. To my count, there wasn't even 14 open classrooms total. There's certain things that you might be able to move around, but in my mind, there was no way to do it. And even if you went, and I would not suggest doing this, but making 4th grade have 5th grade's class size policy of 30 kids, you still need over 10 classrooms to do this. And I just do not see that walking through that building at that point in time. And just to give you a number here, so right now we have 1,529 students on that campus. If you add the 334, you're at over 1,850 kids on that campus. That campus was not designed to have that many kids there. That is more kids than would be on the high school campus with the size of that building. I mean, if you just think about it, that I can't imagine what more we would have to do in terms of, we'd have to build onto there again to that campus just to be able to make that alignment work. And then that's not even talking to the teachers and the students and stuff and that, like cafeteria lines are already ridiculous. There's already combined lunches where some 5th graders have to eat lunch with the 6th graders. I mean, that's without even touching any of that, just high level numbers. I didn't see it. So hopefully that helps.
It does, but I guess, and maybe it's just my deep-rooted concern with this whole thing and how that vote went down. I mean, I was the only one to vote against, the vote we did in February, I think. And it's just my concern with, you look at why we're here, why Audubon closed, is that Skyview building. And that's the kind of mistake that the district is living with today, going back over a decade, close to 2 decades probably at this point. and you look at possibly adding on 25 to 30 million of debt onto the district, how do you fund that? You're limited by Act 1 for the desire for full-day kindergarten, but nobody's had any comments of how you pay for that. We're looking at $900,000 to $1 million a year, where Act 1 gives us $1.8 million, and that's barely covering contracts, not to mention benefits and, you know, the debt we have to incur to fund the high school projects, our COLA projects, F-rated roofs. And that's where I guess my fear comes in, and it's still there today. So, I mean, take that for what it's worth, but, you know, you think about why most of you are sitting at this table is that process that started 4 years ago, and a big concern was why the rush, if you remember that terminology. And, you know, do we need to just take a pause on this whole thing for a year or two, see what enrollment does? I mean, there's a lot of questions about the enrollment study and the validity of it. The consultant never came to present it to us, and that's concerning to me. So it's all those things that I think about as we start thinking about. I'm not saying go back to look at closing this building, but are we pushing along too fast? I guess that's my concern.
Yeah, I hear where you're coming from with the cost, and it is definitely a concern. So I don't want to have, you know, all of these ideas that we're floating out there be taken as, you know, we're going to do all these things, and of course we'll find the money to pay for them, because I think we know that is, some of these are pipe dreams, and I think that this will get whittled down. But I think that to echo some of what Mr. Ryan was saying in terms of accommodating more students on the Skyview Arcola campus, if you were to ask any of the staff at Skyview and Arcola what's the most challenging time of day in terms of student behavior, they're going to tell you it's lunch and keeping a handle on all those kids in the cafeteria. So you add another 400 kids in there, and you know, the behavior problems are going to escalate. And if you talk to any Skyview or Arcola parent about what it's like at dismissal or drop-off time in the morning, they can tell you what a nightmare that car loop is. And forget about picking up kids from after-school activities, because you're really taking your life in your hands at times. So putting more cars on that campus is a real challenge. So if any conversation about putting more kids on that campus is going to involve a full-scale overhaul of the entire campus in terms of, you know, means of ingress and egress and parking. I mean, we can't accommodate all of the parents for any performances there for more than one grade level at a time. So it's, when we talk about accommodating students on that campus, it's not just about the classrooms, it's not just about the students, it's about all that we provide for all of the students enrolled in those grades.
No, I understand it, and I understand all those limitations. I'm not suggesting to add on to Skyview or Arcola campus, but, you know, are there other options? Can you add to Woodland? Can you add to Eagleville? Can you add to Worcester? Can you do something else beside that? I don't know. It just seems like it's, when that vote came in February, I didn't have enough information to conclude that, I felt I didn't have enough information to conclude that taking that one option off the table was, you know, a valid point at that time. So that's kind of, as we think about these discussions, that's where I still have those concerns. So just, that's where I'm coming from.
The only other thing I'll say is when I was touring it as Arcola and Skyview as well, I kept thinking something we've talked about is how has education changed? And I know, it sounds contrite, but we have to think about even your own children who are in college and beyond. Things have really changed. And so you look at that area at Arcola where the hallway's that big. In this world, I teach 7th grade. You can't give kids that limited amount of space. You know how it's different now. It's sad to say, but it is just a different world. And on a positive note, one of my favorite rooms that I saw at Skyview was Mr. Boyle's lab. You talked about STEM. There was this lab with robots all over. And I walked in there going, Amanda needs to get in there and film this. And Dr. Zerbe said, she's got a list, leave her alone. She's booked for the next few months. But, you know, that's what we're here for. And that's why, Brian, like, I don't know what's most cost effective. I mean, I don't know, you know, but in my mind, I can't tear down this building financially. That's why when I saw this company, I thought to myself, gosh, they look really innovative. Can't you fix this, even though $10 or $12 million is a lot of money? And I know what you're saying about, well, I still think we might have should have closed it and added on. Our community's been hit enough. And, you know, we have a neighboring district that I'm not going to get into who's better educationally or not, but because it's growing and because it has land and a lot of business and a lot of people are moving there because the houses are a little bit cheaper and the taxes are a little bit lower and they have pretty blue roofs. But you have to remember what we have here, which is an exceptionally strong education community. And I don't want to use that word, I don't like it. It starts with an S, so I'll use a more elementary word. It stinks that our facilities are where they are, but we need to figure it out. And that's what we're here to do. So I really hope this company comes up with the most cost-effective way to keep this building going and us to move on.
Other comments or suggestions on Arrowhead Forward?
A lot of good dialogue here. I guess I'm not sure I could, to answer Brian's question, not say that some way, somehow, we probably could get 5 grades physically into those 2 buildings. I'm not sure, because I think there's classrooms and that probably could be shared. I think there's flexibility there. We could do it. We definitely, I think, and I'd say definitely, that's not the right word. I have no doubt that we could probably get creative enough to use that flexibility in that space. Now, do we want to do that or not is a different question for different reasons. And to me, I think Mike said that in the beginning, the earliest, maybe the next session, Dr. Zerbe, it really comes down to understanding the pros and cons of the 2 configurations that are currently on the table, which is a K3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 versus the current configurations. You know, I don't know if 4th graders should be in an upper elementary, if that's the proper thing, elementary thing, proper educational thing for these students. I don't know if there's benefits for having a K3 class. I think there might be benefits for us to have more flexibility, so that's why I don't necessarily want to close down having 5 grades up on the campus, which physically creates a whole lot of other issues. But I think it comes down to me, I need to understand more about what the benefits are on that. And I know that they have been provided, but I don't know if maybe it's not that clear that one's better than the other. I definitely think we would have more flexibility if we had a K3 configuration. It allows us flexibility for slightly smaller class sizes in the elementary schools, which is probably where the most relevancy of that class size matters. I think to Jen's point about the REACH program, mental health program, hopefully it can expand in both directions off of Arcola, both down and up. I don't know, Dr. Zerbe, if we see ourselves doing some more co-teaching and more flexibility around that, which in some ways potentially could reduce the number of class sizes that we would need, that would provide additional capacity. So I'm not pushing it back on you, Dr. Zerbe. I'm just saying I need that type of educational, aspect to understand for the grounding of the decision point. Now, physically on this building, just to throw my 2 cents, I think the view of reusing, I think getting feedback, we got some feedback from the Arrowhead parents, which was Arrowhead staff, which was excellent to get some insights, and those that took the tour, and I could see it myself, is one of the simplest things was the triangle versus the rectangular classroom and the ability to see the smartboard. In some places, you can't see the smartboard was some of the feedback that came back from some of the teachers. That is educationally difficult. There was some of the tour we did, there was 25 students, I think it was in a Skyview classroom, and you think, oh, okay, well, maybe we just put 5 more. I don't know physically how you could get 5 more kids, 5 more desks into that classroom and really not affect the educational aspect of how it's done. And some of the rooms in Arcola could be reused. There are definitely some that are not appealing, and they have the nickname of the cave because it's a long hallway with no light and tucked away in the corner. So it doesn't mean it can't be used, but it just is not so, we're not talking widgets here. And we shouldn't be talking about math and squeezing it in. I would rather talk about what is the best thing. And then, to Brian's point, that might be pipe dream. That may not be the thing we have to do. But I think the K-3 configuration with 3 schools would not physically work without some expansion at those other schools, which is going to increase, which is going to have a cost associated with that also. I think the neighborhood school is something that Methacton prides itself on. It's related to land value for those in the western part of the township, Lower Province. So I think there's a lot of positive here. I don't disagree so much, Brian, with your stuff, but I think this could be parallel paths. We can potentially get some information from a consultant. We can talk about the educational aspects. I don't know necessarily if October is going to be the right date, but I think we just need to open up the dialogue, and maybe it reopens some of the ideas that we talked about in January that we closed down. So I went long-winded, sorry.
I just wanted to comment about when we look at 3 schools, Worcester alone, because that's a school that I deal with, they have parking, they have to park for any kind of activities at Huebner Park. You can't even get the parents to attend events. They had to close out, actually, bingo, because could not fit any more parents. There's actually a fire hazard now, and we're not even at highest capacity. Families can't attend functions, and even the driving, right now the car line is out on the road, and it is completely unsafe. So I agree that there's a possibility of adding on to each building. I think that would work. Would it work within, I just think you're just filling them all in, and I don't think we even at Worcester, I could speak alone, it would just, that building could not handle programming, in my opinion, but.
So I've been really quiet. I'm going to echo Paul's points. And if we're going to talk about just what we saw at Skyview and Arcola, what I saw was quite a few empty classrooms. What I saw was a number of, what I would say, overutilized classrooms for the space that was needed there. When there's available space, you grow into it. Personally, I would like to see what that building looks like. I would like to know what the configuration looks like, how we could do it. Because I think, to take this back to the discussion about Arrowhead and how we move forward here, one of the biggest decisions that we need to make in this whole process is whether we are K-3 or we are K-4 in these elementary schools. That alone will dictate whether or not we have sufficient space for full-day kindergarten. And then we need to understand what the knock-on effects of that decision is. Because any decision to add students to the Arcola campus is going to require some modification to the Arcola campus. Whether that's simply traffic flows, right? We started looking at a study in property about maybe an alternative entrance further down Eagleville Road or further north on Eagleville Road. We've talked about Middle School Drive. traffic flow on that campus is a nightmare now that would have to be improved, right? It's only going to get worse when you add 400 more students. But there's also other effects down the road. To come back to, so Brian, to answer your question about what I saw, and listen, I've been a huge full-day kindergarten. Amanda, write that down, full-day kindergarten. Ralph said it. I'm not totally convinced we can't do it. When we look at those two options that Dr. Zerbe presented a couple weeks ago, and we looked at the current configuration versus, a K-3 configuration in 4 elementary schools, I'd like to see what we would have to give up to get there. And what we look at 5 years down the road, 6 years down the road, given the projections that we have in the elementary schools, in the space, when we're going to have to redistrict, right? And some of that, he thought he did a pretty good job of presenting, right, when we start to hit utilizations up around 85-90%, and we're essentially full. I saw a lot of space there, much more so in Arcola than in Skyview. Talking more about goals here, you guys touched on a lot of things. I don't need to repeat it. Obviously, REACH, we've gotten some great feedback. You said that Dr. Rangstadt and Dr. McGann are going to come and present on that. I can't wait to hear what else we're going to do with that program. If we're going to expand that program, we've got to have obvious space in the schools to do it. Lower Providence is supposed to come talk to us about what their ideas are for some kind of joint effort on the Audubon property. To Jen's point about community space, I served as president of Bethesda United for quite a few years. I still sit on the board, and one of the things that every youth organization, every youth sports organization around here fights for in the wintertime is indoor training space. Our gyms are full, and when we get into a gym like this, it's hard to do anything productive with any reasonable amount of people. So whether that's something that Lower Providence wants to do in partnership at Audubon or here when we start to talk about gym space, that has to be part of it. I'd like to make sure that we look at program delivery and what those needs are. And Jen, you touched on some of these. It's been touched on other places, right? To make sure that we have the dedicated art and music classrooms. We went and looked at the OT classroom back here. We didn't look at, on the other side, there's a music classroom about the same size. What are the special ed requirements for students? I think, and Mary, correct me if I'm wrong on this, do all of our severely autistic kids now go to Woodland? Is that correct? Or are we spread out? We're all over now? Okay, we are distributed throughout? Okay. From the building, I think one of the things that we saw in the feedback from the teachers, and it was almost a sad list, to be honest, to read it, is one of the first things that's on that list is, I want a rectangular classroom. I want I want a sink in my classroom. So I don't think we need to get into those basics, because I think that's just kind of a part of this, but it's definitely worth pointing out. Liz, you touched on energy efficiency. I think absolutely we should look at LEED certifications. We talk about green buildings. We can even do things where we integrate the energy efficiencies of the building into a STEM curriculum here, right? We can talk about water gardens and rainwater recovery, and we can make that part of the program that's here too. So there's ways to do things in that respect that not only could save us money long term, right? And I think part of what we do in that space, we've got to understand what the cost is versus what the benefit is going to be in the future energy wise. But there's also an educational benefit to it too. Mary touched on it earlier regarding security considerations. That was one of the reasons, that was one of the things that stood out to me in the proposal that we got from KCBA, was that their principal, who's going to be a lead on our project, sits as the architectural representative on Governor Wolf's School Safety and Security Committee. That's important, obviously, with everything going on. Well, we had a lot of discussions here about entranceways at different schools and what's the safest way to do that. So that obviously needs to be part of the consideration as well. If we do go with a K-3 option, do we have flexibility in our elementary schools to go back to K-4 if things trend the wrong way, right? I'm not saying we should make ultimate decisions based on that, but we should certainly be thinking with an eye towards flexibility and space. Just looking through my pages of notes here. Yeah, I think that's all. I've said enough. Full day kindergarten.
Yeah, I just want to quickly follow up. I spoke once, so I won't do it much more here, but the teacher feedback that we received, if that's possible, can we add that as another section to Arrowhead Forward? We've mentioned different things that we've read off of those pages. I think it would be great for the public to be able to see truly some of the things, and Ralph kind of used the word sad, that they're writing that these are their requests. I think that it should be made public what the teachers in this district are asking for. I mean, yes, they're just like us. Sometimes they'd like to see the great things, right? But a lot of these things are just fundamentals that they're asking for, and I think that would be a phenomenal thing for the public to be able to see that. The timeline, how Brian mentioned, why the rush, that was kind of the slogan years ago. If there's one thing I've learned being on this board for the time that I have, we frequently blow through our timelines, so this is not set in stone for me. In my mind, it never has been. If it takes an extra 6 months to make the right decision, I don't think, I'll speak for all of you with this, but I don't think anyone's up here to make a decision by a certain timeline if it's not the right decision. We're going to all need to have the right information across the board, whether it's finances, educational, whatever it may be, before you make a decision. I don't think anybody up here is going to rush. I don't know if Andrea has her notes here, but I walked next to her for most of the tour. We literally were writing in a notebook, counting the open classrooms and what might be considered an open classroom. Let me repeat again. It would require 14 classrooms on that campus to fit fourth grade in there. We did not come up with 14 classrooms. So I know that it's been talked about that, yeah, it probably could work, or maybe it could work. Draw me a schematic and show me what classrooms you were talking about, because we didn't count it. I hate to be blunt like that, but basically, I would love to see how it's going to work. And the last thing was, I mentioned earlier about the educational impact. This was a discussion back when we were talking about Arrowhead. The idea of moving fourth and fifth together, I think that this really needs to be a focus on administration. How are we treating fourth grade? Are we treating fourth grade like an upper elementary? Now we're dropping the bar even lower and forcing these kids to be, even more independent or whatever. Are they giving up their recess too? I mean, just the little things. I mean, we're now dropping it to fourth grade here. I can't imagine that doesn't have some type of negative impact in terms of what we're doing here. And I could be wrong. I'm not the educational expert up here. That's why we have great administrators that we do to provide that recommendation to us. But I really think we need to focus on, if we go ahead and do this, put fourth with fifth, what does that look like? How are we treating fourth grade, and is that the right thing to do for the district? So that's all I got. Thank you.
Other comments?
I'm going to say anything else, but real quick, because everyone seems focused on this grade configuration. If you look at the districts around, everybody does it a little differently. It depends on the programming that you do. So I personally, and I could be wrong, this is one of the, don't think of that as big of a issue, because it would depend on the programming. Think about it. I think some public schools are K-5 with a 6, 7, 8. Colonial does have the 4, 5. Public and parochial and private, some go K-8, some go K-6. I think this is the one time you're going to hear me say, I think we look at cost effectiveness, because the programming can work. I mean, I know people were concerned about Skyview and not having as much recess. My fifth grader has gym like practically every day. I mean, almost to every day. So I feel like the programming we could make work based on, everybody does it differently if you think about school districts are closing schools based on, some opened K-1 centers and they were like, oh, we don't need that anymore. We're going to switch it back. I'm not saying don't focus on the configuration, but districts make those work. I think we have to focus on where we're going and what we have facility-wise.
Other comments? Considerations?
Yeah, just one other thing to add. Mike, we should compare notes. The one thing that I will ask is, when we come back and you start talking about educational benefits, I think I would not only like to hear from you or Dr. Katona, but I'd like to hear from the teachers that are actually in the classroom that are doing this, and get their thoughts and their feedback as we talk about this. What would the challenges and benefits of some of these things be. I think it's, as we start to look at, and not just for any kind of grade reconfiguration, but also throughout this whole process, we got a lot of feedback from Arrowhead teachers here, but there's also things in our other buildings that we're doing that we could learn from a facility standpoint, right? Spaces, how we manage space, where we have insufficient space for some things and too much space for other things. There's things to be learned from the other schools in the district too. So I think that'll be an important part of our, town hall process.
I didn't get to say one more thing, like everybody else. So I'm going to. The one other element that I think that we haven't discussed, which is a key aspect that I think we need to at least have in the back of our head, is our contracts with our 3 major unions. There is specific wording around prep time. There's specific wording around teaming, specific wording about one school versus the other. So the contractual requirements for any changes is a key aspect of working with the union or negotiating with the union any changes we want to make. I don't want to lose sight of that because they have to be a partner in these changes.
Any other comments? If not, I want to thank the Board of School Directors for their comments this evening. As Ms. Kelly, I want to thank you for taking copious notes. We will post these, and we will certainly know that this is not the last time that we need to have conversation on this, and certainly these were all thoughtful and appropriate discussion points at this stage of the game. My hope is that as we bring on the design professionals, we'll start to synthesize these things and start to target some of this conversation and include members of the public in a similar fashion, possibly in ways like we did with strategic planning and so forth, but we'll leave it up to the design professionals, if approved next week, to kind of make those recommendations with us. But I thank for the attendance of folks here this evening and listening to this conversation. And I say we move forward with the rest of the meeting, and thank you. Thank you, Ms. Kelly. That ends the presentations for this evening. As I mentioned before, there's 4 presentations for the March 26th meeting. As we would proceed with the meeting next week, there will be reports from all the committee chairs. You will notice under 6J of reports, we're making you aware that Dr. Kokenauer is returning as the assistant principal to Methacton High School effective March 19th, 2019, which concludes her assignment. She was assigned as the principal on assignment at Eagleville Elementary School in the absence of the regular principal. We will also ask for public comments on board action items. We will go on to the board meeting minutes. And then we'll move on to item number 9, fiscal items. Mr. Bricker, you want to go over the list of bills and the other items associated here?
This month for your consideration is the list of bills, the treasurer's report, budgetary transfers, the district telephone system replacement as presented tonight by Dr. Sosanovic, the master plan bond proceeds resolution. This will be presented next week by PFM. This is a resolution to authorize PFM to start the bond process with the final approval in the resolution with the amount to be completed for the April board meeting. The approval of the Arrowhead Design Professional as presented tonight by Mr. Fretzen and Mr. Sakala, an individual transportation contract, transfer of committed funds from the master plan to the capital reserve, the purchase of a driver's ed car, and the 2019 master plan projects.
I think it's important that the board knows that these items were discussed in Finance Committee. Please know that under 9H, it says transfer of committed funds. There's an extra E there. So that is actually committed funds. If you recall, we allocated through a resolution that any budgetary surplus from the 2017-18 budget would be anything over 7% of the budget would be allocated to the master plan committed fund. We had asked the Finance Committee that in order to proceed with not only the telephone system, but a number of other capital projects that we outlined in the January 2019 proposed preliminary budget, that we need $625,000 in order to make those projects become reality. Without the transfer of the money from the committed fund to the capital projects, we would not be able to proceed. So the committee had okayed us moving this to consideration, and it is also known that we've had much discussion about the use of the remaining committed funds as a result of the surplus. And that has not been determined at this point, and likely won't be until we get closer to the final decision. I imagine, I'm just going to look over to the finance chairman. I think we were talking about May, somewhere in May, maybe, or even April, possibly.
Probably April is what I'd like to discuss that further.
So I guess I want to take any questions from the board on any of the items under 9. Ms. Drummond?
I have a question on item I, the driver education car purchase. It looks like that the current car is going off a lease, is the conclusion of a lease, and we're purchasing a car, and I just was wondering what factors are going into the lease versus purchase decision.
So the government financing through leases, which allow for fair market leases, fair market value at the end, were eliminated. So you're limited to regular $1 buyout lease, which is essentially buying the car and then give them $1 at the end of the lease. Given that and the discussions with the way we handled the last car, the van, it makes more sense for the school district just to acquire the car after so many years, then we can just trade it in and we'll get the full value of that trade-in to this dealership when we make that trade-in.
Okay. Any other questions? Mr. Earnshaw?
Yes, regarding H, the 625 that we're proposing to transfer to the capital reserve fund, that only includes $250,000 for the phone system. So where's the balance of that?
The balance is in the attached list that's on the agenda. Mr. Bricker, you want to just read those other items?
No, I'm not questioning the other items in there. I saw the list, but the phone system is $487,000. So where's the balance of that coming from?
When this plan was put together, part of the funds that are in the 2019 project on the master plan regarding the security system, as you remember, part of the purchases will go to the phone system. So the other portion of that is in the phone system. So if you look at the security camera system and the phone system in total, with the E-rate rebates that come back to us and the $250,000, that leaves us about $29,000 for cost overruns on those projects. So it's a balance between the capital projects for 2019 as well as the capital reserve piece.
Let me add, I'm not following at all. So we approved the resolution for, I forget how much for the video camera system, right? $600,000, $700,000, right?
No, the phone system, the camera system is about a little less than $600,000. Right. Then there's the E-rebates that will come back on that, and those items will then come off the numbers there. If you give me 1 second. So the total cost of the phone system is $503,994. We have a grant for $25,000. We have an E-rate of $53,645.20, which will leave the amount going against the master plan bond of $425,348.80. The total cost of the phone system is $486,573. We'll use $250,000 for the capital reserve. The remaining balance of $236,573 will go to the master bond. So the total amount going to the master bond is $661,921.80. We have, for the phone system and security system in the 2019 projects of $690,000, $90,000 of soft costs, and $600,000 of hard cost.
So you're counting on some of the 2019 borrowing to fund these projects?
Yes, that's one of the that's in the plans.
Okay, I misunderstood. All right. So are we getting ahead of ourselves here? Because that borrowing would not get approved until April, unless you're saying you've got adequate funds left over from 2018 to fund that along with the roofing projects in item J.
Yeah, we have money left over in the current bond of how much?
About $1 million.
And we have other capital reserve money of about $400,000, and we have obviously the budgetary surplus that went to the master plan of about
It's about $2 million.
Okay.
Okay, so between all those sources, that's enough. If for some reason this borrowing in April doesn't get approved.
That's correct.
There's enough.
That's correct.
Capital funds to cover the video, the telephone system, the roofing, all that.
Yes.
Yes. But it's not all in the capital reserve, though. I just, because you said capital, and I just want to make sure that.
I mean,
there's enough-
committed capital funds,
Yes,
either the
yes.
capital reserve or the master plan committed
Correct.
funds.
Correct.
So I'm not totally sold. So can you do me a favor and just provide us with that breakdown in writing? I know we were talking about from the committed funds, and we talked about that ad nauseum in finance. I went through that. So I'm clear. I'm going to kind of reiterate what Brian just said. The $250,000 that you have allocated on this sheet right here, that's part of this whole 625, the $250,000 that you have allocated to go against the phone system is solely to offset not the entire cost of the phone system project. You want to use the other funds in the capital reserve to pay for the rest of that. Is that what I'm saying? Is that what I'm hearing?
Part of the master plan 2019 items with regards to the security system included the switches and other items associated with the phone system, where we're going to be doing the wiring and everything at the same time.
Yeah, Tim, I hear that, but what Troy presented tonight has nothing to do with switches.
So let me do this. We're going to put a document together that clearly outlines the way we're recommending that both the video surveillance system and the phone system will be paid for. So
I appreciate that.
That'll be in your Friday memo.
Perfect.
And we'll conclude the confusion around this little subject.
So I think you need to show, here's what we have committed to capital. You got it.
I got it.
Including all the roofing and leftover from 2018 that we got to pay and all that kind of stuff.
Exactly.
Another question on the same thing, but not the same item. For the $625,000 here, I just want to confirm, it looks like almost all of these are single one-time items, but is the technology lease buyout a one-time item? Or is that our normal recurring?
So typically, we put items that we want to retain on $1 buyout leases. These leases were entered into previously, and they should have been $1 buyouts. However, they were fair market value buyouts. At this point in time, the items that we need to buy out, $45,000 roughly for facilities, and there is about $159,000 for technology leases. These are items that we need to buy out and retain. So it will be a one-time expense.
Yeah, so there are one-time expenses for back-end equipment, not for end-user equipment. So our end-user equipment usually lasts between 3, maybe 4 years is typically the lease cycle. This is going to be equipment in the back end. It includes our storage area network and other switching equipment that typically lasts from 7 to 9 years.
In any of our other remaining leases, do we have anything else in the future for next year where this will have more?
Dr. Sosanovic and I have been going through them, and we're looking to see if there's any. And then if there are, what we're trying to do is work with the finance company to see how we can adjust for that.
Okay, my only concern with this line of questioning is the idea that I completely am fine with moving one-time expenses over and out of the budget. I do have a concern if this is any type of recurring, even if it's only for 1 or 2 years, we're pulling a recurring item out of the general fund budget to pay with one-time money. We've pulled it out of the budget. It's never coming back in the budget without an additional tax increase in the future or anything like that. So I just want to make sure that there's not, another year or 2 years of these type of things in the future, and we've now pulled this money from the general fund budget. So
Yes, these items are pulled. So the facility and the technology leases that we're talking about, we could extend them out, which would keep them in the general fund and which would impact and require us to increase the numbers that are provided to the finance committee. by doing it this way, since these items are ones that we'll be keeping for long-term, they will not be coming back in again. And as I said before, Dr. Sosanovic and I are trying to identify any other leases that could have been put on fair market values that should be on $1 leases, and we're working through those now.
Okay, just keep us posted on that. Thanks, Tim.
Yep.
Any other questions on items under 9 for Mr. Bricker? If not, thank you, Mr. Bricker. We'll move on to item number 10. Item 10 is personnel items. Mr. Regina.
Yep, thank you. For the board's consideration this evening, we have a few items, one under classified resignations, one item for professional change of status. This is an extension of the Stacy Olitsky position, TOA position at the high school for the Dean of Students. We have one classified change of status, 3 professional uncompensated leaves, 2 classified uncompensated leaves, 4 supplemental contracts, 3 items for the classified substitute list, and 1 item for the volunteer list.
Mr. Regina, would you mind explaining to some degree to the board the change of status for Stacy Olitsky, please?
Yeah, we have some changes, of course, with our Eagleville principal coming back intermittently. We recognize that Dr. Kokenauer is going to still need to be assisting at the Eagleville campus, and we have 2 counselors that have been with our students since about October. And we recognize that having them complete the year with those students certainly would be a best practice from our standpoint, and that's what we're recommending.
So with keeping those counselors in the system with us and approving this recommendation and moving forward with this, it'll cost us about how much extra this fiscal year?
Thank you. The cost is going to be in substitutes, and it will be relatively around $22,000.
Any other questions for items on number 10 from members of the board? We'll just give you a few moments to process that. Seeing no comments or questions, we'll move on to item 11. Item 11 is curriculum and programs. Dr. Katona.
Thank you. The first item that we'll be seeking your approval on is for a doctoral nursing research study by Rosalind Akuda of Audubon. This will be focused at Skyview on behavior-focused assessment of hand hygiene practice and associated factors among elementary school students, and this has been approved through the IRB at Westchester University. The second item is an informational item at this time for this month. We are entering the phase of our textbook adoption, and typically textbook adoption is approved in April. During the March meeting, you are given all of the resources that we are looking to adopt next year, and following next Tuesday's board meeting, these would be on display for community. As you see, there are a number of textbooks this year, several at the high school level. Typically, we look for new resources based on the curriculum cycle, as well as other factors such as items being outdated that we are currently using, new state mandates or initiatives, new standards being put in place in certain areas. And so all of these books have been requested. When it comes to the actual adoption, you may see some of these numbers change a little bit, especially since so many are at the high school, and with having finished course requests, they're still identifying the number of classes and so forth, but I can tell you that the overall amount will not increase. Okay.
Dr. Katona, if I could, it lists here that textbooks available for review, board approval on March 26, 2019. What you just explained doesn't appear to be that these will be approved in March 26. Is that accurate?
No, that is,
Okay. I just want to make sure.
Overlooked that. That is not for approval.
So it's at the April voting meeting?
It's at the April voting meeting.
Thank you very much.
We will keep them, as I said, we'll keep them out for community review throughout the month. And then the last item on here is the Comprehensive School Counseling Plan Act 339, to have that approved as presented.
Any questions for Dr. Katona? Mr. Winter?
Yeah, just number 10, I don't know if there's something missing there.
Yes, this was, okay, this was put together a little bit differently than how it had originally been, so we will fix that. That is actually, I'm not sure what happened there. I don't think that should be number 10. That's actually all part of the essential physics. So the unit price is $39 for 220 ebooks for 5-year license. And then there is also, there would also be 4 hard copy textbooks for $65 each. And so the total is $88.40. That should also be part of essential physics. Thank you.
Any other questions for Dr. Katona? Thank you very much, Dr. Katona. Next, we'll move on to 12 policy. We have a number of policies for first reading. In fact, I believe there are 15 listed. We have a number for second reading as well. Are there any questions from members of the board? We will move on to section 13, which is other. Please know that under gifts, donations, and sponsorships, there are a number of gifts listed, except monetary donation from Patient First of King of Prussia for $1,000 to Arrowhead Elementary School for STEM resources, except a monetary donation from Kelly Maloney of Skyview Music Department, a gift of $230 proceeds from the Coca Exchange fundraiser. The third one, accept the donation of a study guide for pool certification from Jong Yun of Bluebell for a value of $70. Accept an agreement of sponsorship between Vest Incorporated of Warminster donors with the Methacton School District as attached for the right to place a logo on the video incorporated into the Showcasing the Pride of Methacton news series in exchange for a $2,500 donation to the Methacton Education Foundation. Number 5, accept a gift from the Methacton Education Foundation to fulfillment of a grant for Woodland Elementary, an aquarium for studying lives around us, a gift of $4,560. 6, accept a gift for the Methacton Education Foundation to be used for the fulfillment of a grant at the high school for scholarships in the OIC college tours, a gift value of $3,200. 7, accept a gift from the Methacton Education Foundation to the Electric Car Club for the conversion of the Triumph Spitfire, a value of $3,500. 8, accept a gift with Methacton Education Foundation to be used to fulfillment of a grant for the Methacton High School Robotics Club, gift valued at $2,000. And last, accept a gift from the Methacton Education Foundation for the fulfillment of the Arcola School for Arcola Philanthropy Club, a gift value of $11,010.36. There are 2 trips, one for the Methacton Orchestra to Pittsburgh on April 3rd, 2000 through April 6th. Costed district $522.45 for one substitute for 3 days. The second one is a trip for the high school band to Pittsburgh to attend the Pennsylvania Music Educators Association All-State Concert Band Festival, April 3rd through the 6th, no cost to the district. The last one is commencement exercises. In consultation with Dr. Sorgini, high school principal, we have determined, based on the schedule, the way that it is today, and the fact that I declared that there's no more winter weather coming, that we will recommend to the board for their consideration a graduation on Thursday, June 13th at 4 p.m. For the Methacton High School class of 2019. Any questions on items under 13 other?
I can't keep track of all the wonderful donations from the Methacton Education Foundation. Did I miss this gift to the Arcola for $11,000 somewhere? Are we going to be hearing more about that?
So we certainly are going to hear more about some of these. I think that the executive director for the foundation, as well as the president, is working with Ms. Kelly and trying to provide opportunities to showcase some of these checks. Not every check not every donation comes with a big check and a big presentation, but we're trying to do some of those things in the schools. And certainly some of these are things that we've done in past years. So this philanthropic matter at Arcola, it's something we've done on an annual basis. But you're right. I think it's worth noting the great work that the foundation has done and is continuing to do, and the aspiration that they have to support the programs and the development of programs and services here in the Methacton School District. So, we're really proud of the work that they've done and the fact that they've helped so many of our students and our teachers here in the district.
One other quick question. With graduation, it seems like this was, dare I say, easier this year. Is that because we changed the calendar and had some built-in dates? Usually we're discussing, we got to pay a fine and we want to keep it not on a Monday. And how is that because of the days we built in, or did we luck out? Do you know what I mean? I mean, I've thought last year we had to like...
It's a complicated, I will say this. I think that the changes that the board adopted in terms of dealing with snow days was a positive change. All right? I think it keeps the holidays whole and allows families to plan. And I think that was one of the primary purposes for that change. While we used both of those days in March, I think they were both Fridays, I can tell you that, while it would have been nice to be off on a Friday and maybe potentially nice March, spring weather, certainly getting things done. But this year is certainly a lot different than last year. And for a number of reasons, which I don't necessarily want to get all into. But you're absolutely right. It is much easier this year to make this decision than last year. But it isn't always difficult to make the decision. With that, we'll move on to, if there are more questions on 13, we'll move on to 14, the dates for board members' calendars, and then I'll turn it over to the president.
All right, now I get the fun part. Anybody with old business or new business to discuss this evening? Mr. Navarrete.
And just one question, and I don't, is it going to come back through education, maybe an analysis of the changes that we made to the substitute rates last year? Is that in the works somewhere?
Mr. Regina?
I apologize, Ralph. Could you repeat that?
He just reported on it at the education meeting, and I can share it with you. I have to admit, I didn't put a lot of information in my committee notes. I just kind of said we reviewed it, but I'll give it to you right now. Right? Okay.
Thanks.
I thought I included the presentation, but if not, I'll look and we'll get it in this Friday. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So, yeah, Mr. Regina did present at the committee meeting. But we do not necessarily have plans to present to the full board, but we'll share the document out. And it has some of the financial aspects.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I
apologize. If I missed it, then my fault.
Mr. Ryan?
Just one quick thing. I just wanted to say, I didn't get a chance to say it before, thank you to all the community members who came out this evening for the tour. It's great to show the interest and, to see where your tax dollars are going and to, see the future of, what the board's going to be discussing over the next year. So I just want to big thank you to the community for coming out tonight. Thank you.
Anyone else with old business or new business? Okay, at this point, we open it up for courtesy of the floor. As a reminder, since I see a lot of not familiar faces here, at this time, you can speak on any matter that could ever come before the board, and you have approximately 4 minutes, just in the interest of respecting everyone's time. So if you have something you'd like to speak about, please go ahead and approach the podium. And yes, make sure that you introduce yourself with your name and the municipality and where you live.
Hi, Brian Reagan, Yerkes Road in Collegeville. I just have a few thoughts. I'm extremely concerned after attending this meeting, much more concerned than I thought I would be before I came. I feel like the earlier conversation spent a ton of time revisiting an issue that I felt like you decided in January or February. I feel that there are many of you that still want to consider 3 schools. I feel like that option is still being tossed around, and I find that very concerning. I'm very concerned about the timeline. I want to speed up your timeline, not slow it down. When I look at it, you're going to take 7 months before you're going to make a decision. At that point, once you make that decision, assuming you even make it down, and I heard people talking about, well, we could go 6 months beyond that, you're 9 to 10 months in design, or excuse me, 9 to 12 months in design, and at least 2 years to renovate if the kids are still in this building, and probably 2 years to build and demo the building. So you're years out from anybody seeing anything here, and every day that it goes, you're going to spend more money putting into this building during that time period. So I'm very concerned about that time. I couldn't be a bigger fan about this school. I have 2 sons that attend here now. I think the staff here is excellent. I have no complaints about them whatsoever. But just because they are great and could do great things in this building does not mean that we should take a less is more approach. I find anything beyond any comments to that very scary, quite frankly. If KCBA comes back and tells you they can fix this building for $10 or $12 million, I would be very, very worried. I think that if that happens in 8 to 10 years, there'll be a school board sitting here complaining about this board the way that you guys complain about Skyview. I think any idea that we can do that for $8 million is scary. I would also say I'm very nervous about renovating a building. I work in a school district where the building was renovated. I worked in it while it was renovated. It is a very painful and difficult process. It'll be even more so with elementary school children. But most importantly, I think this whole conversation is backwards. I don't understand why the financial report doesn't come first. To me, this is a simple conversation. If you have the money to build a new Arrowhead right out there on the field and not exceed Act 1, if the debt service doesn't exceed that, then that's what you do. That will last for decades and decades and decades, and you won't be putting a Band-Aid on a building that you will then eventually knock down and put a new building up, whether it be 5, 10, or 15 years from now. And if you don't, you don't. And then you have that conversation about, okay, well, what can we afford? But I don't understand why the financing doesn't come first. So I would ask that you take that into account very seriously first, and I would also ask that we remember that any time we delay is more money that you're going to spend keeping this building going the way it is now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Regan.
Hello, my name's Kathy Byer. I'm a local resident. All my children came here, all 5 of them graduated. And I just want to start by saying I was really impressed with the board and all your communication. I thought it was just amazing. You went on so many topics that were great. A couple things I just felt that I could bring up that maybe you didn't think of when you were considering the phone services, that since you're also considering possible renovation, huge renovations, even maybe demo, that if you invest all that money into your phone and wiring at this point, and then you come down, the architect comes in and says, oh, I want to take this wall down or this wall down, and we just invested all that money into the wiring, then maybe you could get this wonderful architect, sounds like a wonderful architect that you found, to go in with this phone system and wiring system before you commit to changing. And maybe that could even address some of those teachers' issues or concerns, on having the phone by the door, like maybe things could change, that type of thing. So that was something I thought maybe we could bring up. And I like the approach that he said, the contractor said he used. He didn't ask for fees right up. When he was interviewing the architects, he didn't get the fees right away. He saw what they had to offer first, then went to the fees, and then it was an icing that he was a lower price, that maybe you could do that also when you're looking at your pipe dreams that you said. Get what you want, see what you want, then look at fees, and then work from that. I like the idea of the renovation and adaption versus the demolition, but it's always what's cost effective. And that's pretty much it. When you talk about the full day of kindergarten, I was wondering if that was to be considered as a mandate or optional, parent optional. Has that ever been discussed, like where if a parent opts for the full day, they can do that?
Generally speaking, we try not to turn this into a question and answer,
okay.
just so it doesn't devolve, but I will
All
say
right.
we're not at that point in the conversation yet.
All right, well, so that was one thing that I thought if ever you consider that maybe it would be an optional item. And then one other quick thought, when she was talking about the beautiful labs up at Skyview and everything, that maybe we could have lab days. I don't know what that would, like where the children were bused up there, like if you had a lab day, something like that. Or we have that empty school at Audubon that maybe that could be utilized in that capacity. So that's about it. All right, and thank you again for all your hard work.
Thank you, Ms. Byer. Mr. Beam?
Jim Beam, Worcester. I have two comments. One, just as an individual citizen here in the township. When you were dealing with items 9F and 9J earlier, actually I thought, Madam Board President, I had the very same concern that you did about the contract and how it worked with respect to the solicitor review. I thought it was very cryptic, frankly, and I think you could solve it very simply by deleting the last phrase, which is contract pending solicitor review, and instead replace it with conditioned on contract review and approval by solicitor. That makes it very clear as to what's going to happen, and I just think would take away any sort of cryptic nature about it. The second comment I have is as president of the Methacton Education Foundation. Next week, there will be a report that's going to be given by Nikki Krelovich, our executive director. I've got another meeting that night, so I can't be here. But yes, you did see a number of donations that are being made by the foundation, and you're going to see more. This is not the end, it's the beginning. But as we teach our children, money doesn't grow on trees. We don't just pull this out of thin air and present things to you. We work hard with members, and when I say hard, we work diligently with members of the community and businesses and others. And I'm delighted that the meetings are televised. I know that some people watch them, and that's important. We explain what we're doing, what the mission is, and that is to help this school district in ways that your budget just can't cover. And we're all concerned about the amount of spending that goes on. The good news is the foundation is dealing, I think, pretty effectively and finding great support within the community for projects to help improve this district without having to come within the budget of the school district. So I just want people to understand that this is an ongoing process, and it's a process that is working because our community members are recognizing the importance of what we're doing and how it benefits all of our children throughout the district. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mr. Beam.
Hi, my name is Katie Thiel. I'm in Lower Providence. I do want to say, I want to echo what has already been said, that I left the last meeting about the decision not to close Arrowhead very confident and actually really pleased with the board. I am a parent here at Arrowhead. I've had a great experience. And I also, being a resident and being a homeowner, I have a very close eye on the value of my home, and I understand very keenly how the value of the education provided at Methacton has an impact on the value of my home. And I was confident that not only my decision to send my child to Methacton, the last decision that was made was a good one, but also to buy in Methacton. I'm concerned hearing the conversation today and the debate going to 3 elementary schools, and also as a current teacher who's taught in many different areas, I am concerned about the idea of moving 4th grade up to Skyview and Arcola. And some of the conversation that went on. I have taught in parochial schools. I have taught in K-8 schools. And there is a very keen difference of a school that has maybe 15 per grade or 30 split into 2 classes, and what that does at lunch and the social impact that happens with those students, and the amount of students socially and what happens at that lunch. Thinking about my own son in that environment as a 4th grader when he might be around a bunch of 8th graders and 7th graders has me keenly concerned about his experience at Skyview versus in an elementary school. The other concern that I have is about recess and how 4th grade has recess here versus up there. Yes, they have gym, but there's evidence that shows increased recess can increase test scores and academic achievement. So I don't want to, it concerns me hearing about the possibility of losing that, and I know that there needs to be, that there isn't a playground, or I've heard that there might not be a playground in Skyview and Arcola, so that also has me very concerned. Let me just check my notes because I was writing. I do want to say that I heard some things that sounded amazing with the innovation, the ability to pull in more inclusion. There's also stuff going on in different school districts. North Penn is doing something about bigger, more flexible class sizes and inclusion. That sounds fantastic. I teach in a STEM school right now, and I was like, yes, when you debate like pie in the sky ideas, man, put a greenhouse in. I worked in a school with a greenhouse. Get the kids' hands dirty. Those are great ideas, and I want to encourage them, but I do have those keen, having an eye on my property value and changing the configuration the way that is right now, I really do have serious concerns about them, and I wanted to share that from my own personal experience and as a property owner. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Thiel. Ms. Arnone?
Kelly Arnone, Lower Providence. I'm very concerned that we're dwelling on decisions that have already been made. I understand the vote to keep Arrowhead open was not unanimous. However, with so much time spent going back and forth over and over again regarding moving grades around when it was previously established not to be an option, nothing's going to get done if we remain hung up on previous decisions. Any single person's visit, I understand you visited Arcola and Skyview, but you got a snapshot. You were there for I don't know how long, but it wasn't enough to do a comprehensive study of could classrooms be moved around. That's why professionals were hired. That's why they completed a utilization study. That's what needs to be examined. The houses projected to be built in that pipeline with the 500 houses, they're already starting. I ran into a Worcester parent today who told me that they just moved to the area, had no idea, and they broke ground on 250 homes next to her home today, or I'm sorry, in the past week. So the things are happening. There's not enough room to shuffle students. We don't have to look at just how many kids we have this year. How is Skyview and Arcola right now? We need to look at how is it going to be in the next 5 years. There's going to be more kids if this pipeline continues, and if 250 homes have already started, it's a matter of time. It's very, very frustrating as a taxpayer and as a parent to see the progress being slowed down so much by this perpetual back and forth of already established decisions and information. Very little has been done at this school in 40 years. Please start moving forward.
Thank you. Mr. Arnone?
Thank you. Anthony Arnone, Lower Providence Township. I would echo a lot of the sentiments that have come from speakers before me about kind of the step back that sort of happened in this meeting to start thinking and considering other options and changing grade levels again when we already had a decision at the last meeting. And I think coming from that architectural background, anytime you step into the process, we've gone through an RFP and gotten proposals and accepted a proposal from KCBA, but anytime you step into that process kind of tepidly and aren't fully engaged in that process, you're not going to get anything significant out of it. So that I'd be very concerned with the fact that if we are stepping into that design phase now and this feasibility study, half-heartedly, we're not going to get anything real out of it. So I would encourage us all to really engage KCBA and push towards, what their insight is for developing Arrowhead and the solutions of whether it be an expansion or a new building or renovation and a combination of both. But definitely engage in that process, just like they're going to bring the community in at these town halls. We have to be fully committed to it. Also, I'd just like to bring up some things that I'd thought about in that process, and I'm sure I'll share it at any town halls that occur. But things like what KCBA may have insight into as far as ongoing capital plans beyond just development in the initial phase and how they build out the construction of the new building or expansion, but thinking into the future and helping shape some of our thoughts in the future so that we're not kind of back in this same predicament or what we see from happened at Skyview, 10, 15 years later. Also, I'd like to see things like, I'm not sure what was in the RFP, but things like, what is their end deliverable? Are we expecting that to only be just a feasibility study? Are we going to be presented with more than one option of renovation or new? And will they be providing a more detailed cost analysis or cost estimate at the end of that process? Because I think there was a lot of vague terminology in what we saw in 2018, and it'd be helpful to get a more broken out list of what constitute masonry repairs versus exterior facade upgrades versus just exterior facelift. Same on the interior side. There's a lot of just terminology. It looks like there's significant overlap. Then maybe that number is somewhere in the range of the 10 to 14 million, but more detail would definitely be appreciated, because I think then we can have a very honest conversation about how we proceed with renovations or new work. But again, I think we should jump into this wholeheartedly and really engage in the process and not just dip our feet in the water. Thanks.
Thank you. Dr. Zvertnik?
Jen Zvertnik, Lower Providence Township. Just like everyone has said, I was surprised that we were still talking about the K-3 option. I thought that was off the table. I kind of made my own list when Ms. Kelly was making her about what you would consider going forward with renovating and what you would bring to the firm. I work in special education. I go to anywhere from 2 to 3 different schools in 2 different districts on any given workday. So I'm in and out of a lot of buildings, and I see the pros and cons of a lot of buildings. Mental health issues, unfortunately, are on the rise. As you all know who all work in education, emotional and behavior concerns are escalating in children. So please consider the special education considerations when you're renovating or rebuilding. Calm down room, a sensory room. I would hope that related services like speech, OT would all not be in shared rooms, ELD, rooms for music lessons, those type of things all have their own dedicated space. Districts are now moving to having STEM as a special. I would love Methacton to consider that as well. I know some elementary schools in Methacton have TV studios, so the STEM classroom could also have room for a TV studio. I agree with Jen. I would love if REACH could extend down to all the elementary buildings and Skyview in Methacton, so having room for that. I agree that you should reach out to the community and look at the youth organizations. I agree, my children are very active with ARA, and we can never come here to Arrowhead to use the gym. So I do think if you reach out to like ARA, Methacton United, Boys, and like Girl Scouts, and seeing what communities need out there, that you would get money back from them, and they would be able to use the school after hours. So that would be a way to recoup the funds if the organizations are giving you money to use our facilities. I think it's great that you did tour Skyview and Arcola for this, but I implore you to please tour other schools outside of our district. Phoenixville I know I've talked about this before, but they recently built PALC and Manavon, which is a conjoined Phoenixville Area Early Learning Center, which is kindergarten and first grade, and then Manavon, which is 2 through 5. Please talk to them. It's a beautiful building, but there's definitely pros and cons. So even if you can't tour it, if you can at least make some calls, talk to the superintendent over there, talk to the principals, so you can kind of learn the pros and cons of what another district's gone through. Upper Marion just opened 2 elementary schools this year, Gulf and Cali. Just like in PALC, they have, in between every single classroom, they have another room, which each classroom has like a sliding doors, and the classrooms can come together, and they have flow in and out, and the kids have movement. There's a white, like a smart board. They have bean bags. They have bookshelves. The kids can come in. It's really wonderful. So just seeing what other districts are doing out there, I would ask you to do that. I agree about safety. I'm very glad to hear that there is that safety expert on the firm. As you all have seen around here, I'm sure the list that an Arrowhead teacher may have said was simply a door on their classroom, something that they could have asked for. I also hope that the person who gets buzzed into the building couldn't have just free reign into the building, that there was another locked area that they would enter into. And then the last thing, again, like Kim and Ralph said, was full-day kindergarten would be on my list as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Andrews?
John Andrews, Lower Providence. I was good to see the board discussions this evening. And it was good to hear of the excellent recommendations for the design services outfit. Now, overall, once in a while over the years, I've said to the boards that when we had Indians living in this country, we still do. For instance, with the Navajo, I'm sorry, not the Navajo, the Iroquois tribes that were in the northeast part of this continent, they would discuss issues and vote on them and not come to a conclusion until they had unanimous decisions. In other words, they respected the worries of each individual tribe voter. This evening, we clearly heard comments about the finances are up in the air, the educational qualities are up in the air, the deficiencies in this building, how do you balance those against some of the other issues? One of the options in the January presentation by the superintendent was a K-5 structure, and relative to that, there are a number of schools that have a K-4 and then 5 to 6, and in every one of those instances, the test scores in grade 5 are down. Regarding test scores, you don't have that problem in one particular school in Philadelphia where it's a K-12 school. Their SATs are like 1,400 and nothing else comes close in the entire state. And if you had 1,400 SAT scores, you'd have great land values. So I think that right today we're rushing into awarding a contract for design services. I think we need a few more months to think things through and to get more facts. And unfortunately, we do have problems with directors who had their minds made up before the November presentation, and that is a total lack of fiduciary responsibility. We need to have all the facts on the table before we announce our individual decisions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Andrews. Anyone else for courtesy of the floor? All right, I'll take a motion to adjourn. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Neverett.
That's right. I just want to address, there was a lot of comments tonight about the commitment of this board to staying, keeping this school open. And I want to assure everybody that, part of what you saw tonight was an open, honest discussion about, in my opinion, is probably the biggest issue facing our district right now, and it's how we address this school. Across this table, there are 8 of 9 of us that are absolutely committed to keeping this building open. So please, Mr. Reagan, you brought up the question about anybody thinking about 3 elementary schools. I ain't thinking about it, okay? The discussion, though, is one that John just touched on, is about the fiduciary responsibilities, how we manage what we have going forward. It is important for us to see the financials now. I mean, we've seen different scenarios, but as Mike said earlier, the discussion about how we fit this borrowing in with all of the other obligations that we have to our district in the master plan is maybe the single most important thing here, because we are constrained on revenue. None of us wants to pay any more taxes than we have to. We work hard in the finance committee to strip as much fat out of this budget that we can to avoid that and still maintain the quality of programs here. So we are wholeheartedly, I'll speak for myself, but I think I'm speaking for a lot of people up here, we are wholeheartedly committed to renovating or rebuilding this school as necessary. We just need to be responsible at how we do it, and if the most responsible thing requires that we reconfigure grades, there's a lot of difficulties in doing that, right? There's more expense involved in doing that. We have to. But if you go back and look at the utilization presentation that Dr. Zerbe gave in January, even go back and look at those numbers and the way that the spacing is in the schools over the next, 2, 3, 5, 10 years, and look at what that looks like. It becomes obvious that it has to be part of the conversation. And I may be in the minority up here saying that, but I think we need to seriously look at it. But make no mistake, there are at least 8 of us up here that are fully committed to making sure that this building is rebuilt or renovated in some major fashion to address the flaws that you all saw here tonight. So, thank you.
Okay, I'll take a motion to adjourn. There's a motion and a second. Meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.